Board of Trustees here at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. I have called the meeting to order, and I would like Adam to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Lori, could you conduct a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Trustee Carey.
Here.
Trustee Kramer.
Here.
Trustee Jay is absent today. Trustee Rose.
Here.
Trustee Chaplin.
Here.
Trustee Cunningham.
Here.
Trustee Janoli.
Here.
Trustees Fraza.
Here.
And Trustee Sperber.
Here.
We do have a quorum today. This takes us to the election of officers, and in item 1.4, we are looking to appoint a chairman. This chairman will be from Washoe County. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Sperber, would you mind? Okay.
I'll go ahead. I nominate.
Go ahead. Please do.
I guess, is there a slate?
The slate is Lisa Gianoli and Adam Kramer. So.
Jessica, sorry, could you speak in your microphone?
Adam Kramer is chair.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
We will now move to the election of vice chair. Do I hear a motion nominating a vice chair?
Can I make a motion? Richard J.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else? I'm sorry. Usually we have like people who are interested. I'm totally in favor of it. I just wanted to know if anyone else was interested. I think.
He's going to ask for other nominations.
Okay. Right.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair?
And just a question, this one, I think after the county, it goes to, it goes to Tahoe, I believe. Is that correct?
He'll go to the RCVA appointment, who would be.
Okay,
Vice Chair.
so, and then Tahoe. Okay, because I didn't know, like, if Carol wanted to, that was the only reason we had. Okay.
I actually thought about it, and then I thought about it again. And I think
Okay.
I'm good with where I am, and wherever our new chair needs me to be, I'll be happy to serve.
Seeing no other nominations, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We will now move to the election of secretary. Do I hear a motion nominating a secretary?
I'll nominate Jennifer Rose as secretary.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. We will now move to the election of a treasurer. Do I hear a motion nominating a treasurer?
I'll nominate Trustee Gianoli.
Second?
Are there any other nominations?
Who was the second? Carol,
Trustee
thank you.
Chaplin. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
No public comment.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Did you approve?
Second.
I have a change.
Oh.
Yes, please.
9.2, it indicates This was with respect to the professional service agreement for KPS 3. And it indicates a request was made by Trustee Cunningham to have a report recap at the end of the 3 years to determine if the target market is being reached. My request was that a report/recap be conducted in December at the end of this calendar year.
Are you referring to the minutes for item number 4 or to the agenda item which we're on currently?
Let's go with 4.
Okay, let's finish item number 3, for which we have a nomination in a second.
Can we repeat the nomination in second, please? The motion in second?
Motion second, thank you.
Seferaza and Sperber.
Thank you.
All those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item number 4, approval of the minutes. Trustee Cunningham?
Do I need to repeat? Do you want me to repeat it, or? I think
I-
you've. Okay, just in the minutes from June 9th, 2022 board meeting, item 9.2 indicates I made a request to have a recap at the end of 3 years. The request was to have a report and a recap in December of this year, at the end of this calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you. As amended, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve?
Trustee Gianoli, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Trustee Sperber. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay?
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 5, President's.
Second.
I think we just approved. We have to-
Is that a motion for both minutes or just the first set of minutes? Trustee Seferaza, I thought we were just calling on the first set.
That's correct,
Four
because
point
there was
one.
a,
Sorry.
yes.
Item 4.2,
4.1.
the approval
Yeah.
of the June 30th, 2022 special board meeting minutes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Approve, sorry.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Now, item number 5, President CEO report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Nice to see everybody this morning. As usual, I'd like to begin the CEO report with our safety tip from Mr. Ted Ohm. Ted, good morning.
Trustees, our new chair, Mr. Carey, and President, Mr. Griffin. So boy, the weather's here now finally, huh? 100+ degrees. So I know we're all drinking as much water as we possibly can to make sure we stay out of trouble. With this hot weather, I spent that holiday, June 19th, with my grandson and granddaughter at Wild Waters. And, you know, years ago, and Mr. Griffin explained to me several years ago, you did this, right? Where you wrote your phone number on your child's arm in case they got lost. And I go, well, that's kind of extreme, I thought. I never would have thought to do that. But after watching the 6-year-old run around, I'm going, yeah, okay, I'd do that in a minute, because no sooner you turn your head and he's somewhere else. But the granddaughter, she was easy. She pretty much stayed with all her friends. So that brings me to how do you, we talked about being prepared for different things. And one of the things is being prepared for your, you know, in case of emergency, if somehow you're separated, but having an emergency contact card for each one of your family members filled out that you can have in your vehicle, or somehow a lot of the kids were running around at the water park with these lanyard things that were sealed. And they had different, I think they had their pass in there, and it seemed like a great place to have some kind of information on how to get hold of the parents. And lo and behold, I wondered, just like any more, I wonder if there's an app. And sure enough, there's an app for it. So on most phones, you can enter your emergency contact information on the phone software inside there. But the problem is, if you lock your phone, the emergency responders can't get to it. So there's an app, and it's they call it, I think, a persistent screen that even though your phone's locked, the emergency responders can get your phone and get that to that emergency contact information. So, of course, with anything, the really nice, apps are going to cost you $4 or $5 a month, but they do have some free ones that are available that you can do that with. So, those are my safety tips for today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ted. I believe I actually tattooed that phone number into my son's arm. We have a very full agenda today, so I will be brief, but I wanted to provide the board kind of a midsummer update. Of course, summer is our peak season, and we're having another really strong summer. After last summer, where it was a struggle to hang on, we had so much business so quickly. Our levels are running consistent with 2019. And just slightly below last summer, which was kind of a lot of air being let out of the balloon after being stuck at home for a year. So that's not surprising. And it's encouraging that we are basically where we were 3 years ago, day in and day out. The really positive news is that you have not seen any media releases with us asking people to get a ride to the airport. Our parking system is performing really well this summer. So all the investments we made in additional staffing and in the shuttle system, maybe the rate adjustment is helping us a little bit. And of course, the blue lot that you see out there has been reconfigured, slightly expanded. All of that is working. And while we are very busy and very full, we are never completely full. And we can see where we have the bandwidth and we have it when we need it. Overall, our seat capacity is down 10% from where we were a year ago, which is also something we've seen coming for some time. Charlotte provided a lot of seats in the market for us last summer, and so when Charlotte left, there was going to be an adjustment. It also reflects a nationwide network contraction from the air carriers given their labor challenges. Our load factors are above 90% on average, so when it seems like the plane can't possibly get any fuller, it gets a little bit fuller. There are very few seats to be had in this market, which is great. Airline quarterly earnings are coming out now, and it's the best they've had since pre-pandemic. So it's good to see they're getting back on solid ground. We're all paying more for airfare than I think any of us have ever seen, and that's being reflected in their quarterly earnings, which is good because they're digging out of a very deep hole. We're getting ready for a slowdown, just back from a meeting with other airport executives in our region, and it's not really a question of if a recession is coming when you look at all the right economic indicators. It's just a question of timing and a question of how deep that recession is. But that is something that the industry is watching, especially this fall as the leisure travel slows down, everybody goes back to school. But we also hope to see a continued rebound in business travel as more conferences get going in the fall, more people hit the road like they used to pre-pandemic. And then here locally, we're busy getting ready for 2 new airline entrants that the board is aware of. Spirit Airlines will start in August, and Sun Country Airlines will start in September. Exciting to have, at that point, of all the domestic seats available to U.S. citizens, 98% of those seats are represented with the air carriers that we will have based here in Reno, which really provides just an incredible base for us to work from to increase frequencies, increase destinations. The only airlines we really won't have at that point are Hawaiian, and we'll keep trying, but I'm not holding my breath on Hawaiian. And then newer entrants into the market, Avilo and Breeze, that you may have heard of. They're still working out where they want to fly and taking delivery of equipment. Honestly, now I see they're struggling with labor. So having 98% of the market represented here is fantastic and exciting, and we'll do our best to hang on to all of it. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report for this month. Thank you.
Thank you, and I do want to tell you, you sent this out into the report to the board, but the meetings with both Senator Masto and NV Energy over the last 2 weeks, I think, are very instrumental to the future of this organization as well.
Absolutely. As noted in my weekly report, we have friends in high places, and just a really fantastic meeting last week with Senator Cortez Masto. It's rare to get an hour with a senator on anything, and somehow we did, and walked through the More R&O program. She's incredibly supportive and basically offered to assist in any way possible, including with our air carrier partners, which is really valuable, just knowing that we have that. And then a fantastic meeting with the CEO of NV Energy, talking about our consolidated rental car facility and the ground transportation center, and how green we hope to make that. And I will tell you that is a very hot topic in the industry, is what's happening with the rental cars and their transition to electric vehicles, and which grids are prepared for that increased draw and which are not. And we are really well positioned, having heard some really horror stories from other places where even if they wanted to do that, it's simply not available to them. So NV Energy is poised to assist us in any way possible, and they're ready to bring resources and capital to bear. So that is a really good place for us to start from. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Trustee Cunningham?
Thank you. With respect to the report, first off, it's dated February, so that should be changed. Under the media and public outreach part of the report, it indicates additional media opportunities in the announcement of Chair Kramer. And I'm very concerned about that going out in a public report well before we voted you in a few minutes ago. So I just wanted to express my concern. Thank you.
Noted. That's a mistake. That shouldn't have happened. That's on me, so I apologize. We certainly don't preclude the board's actions. So thank you for calling that out, and we will correct it.
Any other comments? Moving on to item number 6, board member reports and updates. Are there any board member reports or updates?
We do have, I believe Darren's going to present to the RSCBA in September, and the staff's been coordinating with RSCBA staff on the legislative surcharge to help with the air service. So I think there's a plan in the works, and be presented, I'm assuming, to this board too, Darren, and as well as the RSCBA board, so to help with the air service fund.
Trustee Rose.
Just one update from our Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday regarding the $50 million non-revolving line of credit. I just want to point out that we did unanimously approve that to come forward to the board today. There was one question asked by Trustee Giannoli, and the response was we could do it either way. I'll go into it more when we get to the item, but I just want to say that when we approved it to come to the board, I stated at that meeting that I would prefer if the whole board made the decision on which direction we took this particular question, rather than the Finance Committee solely making that, motion to move that point forward. So I kind of want to separate that out, and I think our CFO has graciously added an additional slide to his presentation that we didn't have on Tuesday to further clarify that. So when we get to that item, I just want to make sure everybody knows that we didn't make that decision yet fully. And then if we could just discuss it at that time, Chair Kramer.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other reports, comments? Moving on to item number 7, items of special interest, beginning with item 7.1, recognition of retiree with 20 plus years of service, Dave Pittman, and the presenter will be Gary.
Good morning. Gary Probert, Chief Planning Infrastructure. Chairman Kramer, Trustees, CEO Griffin. I'm here to announce the retirement of David Pittman. Going to be a sad day for us, but very excited for him. David will be retiring August 1st, and so give you a little bit of background on David. He started out at the Tinker Air Force Base, which is in Oklahoma, which is also where he was born and raised. I think he spent 15 years or something like that. 17 years there. He then went to Dallas Love Field, spent 6 years as an ops supervisor, and then came here about 22 years ago. Started in the airfield maintenance superintendent. He's currently the director of facilities and maintenance. So he oversees all the maintenance of the airport, including all the buildings, all the airfield, throughout the whole campus here. So David, he's kind of quiet and private about all of his accomplishments here. But his team will tell you his leadership and his support to them is tops, unlike any others. He's hired the right people at the right time, and he's enabled them to make changes in the organization. These changes have made this place a very clean, well-maintained, safe, and efficient airport, one of the best in the country. Let's see. So his department helps maintain the airport. They set up for events and maintain, as mentioned, throughout the terminal concourses, everything. They're also responsible for the Part 139 inspections. Last year, 0 faults were found, so a perfect score. Yeah, and that's with help with other departments as well. Just real quick, a couple projects that he has worked on, some of the bigger ones, the Gateway Project, baggage handling system, the building control system. And you've seen this where he's been presenting replacing the building controls, the thermostats. So you know it's time to retire when you're replacing something you put in the first time. So, I only have a couple weeks left. I'm trying to get everything I can out of him. So I'll continue to go out, come and see you. Please don't change your phone number. And anyways, gonna miss David. He's a true friend. I thank him for his support of me this past year, teaching me everything about the building and the maintenance side of things. So congratulations, David.
Thank you, Gary.
Plaque here for you, David. Reno Tahoe Airport Authority wishes every success to David Pittman. Thank you for your 22 years of dedication and loyalty, 2000 to 2022.
Thank you again, Dave. Moving on to item 7.2, recognition of outgoing chair, Sean Carey, and the presenter will be Darren.
Mr. Former Chair, please stand right here. Let me embarrass you for a second. Mr. Chair, at this time, it's my honor to recognize Sean Carey for his dedicated service as chairman of the RTAA Board of Trustees. It's been a year of incredible accomplishments made possible under the guidance and leadership of our chair. I just want to run through a list of some of the things we got done this past year, Sean. Top of the list, I think, is the launch of the More R&O program, hopefully or close to $1 billion transformational improvement plan for the airport, which included the board adopted landside development plan. Getting our landside figured out was a major milestone made possible by Sean's leadership and the support of the board. A huge accomplishment. More R&O will go on for many years, but this will be the year where we started, where we unhatched this thing and started it on a long journey of transformation for this airport. A lot of other accomplishments. We reached new bargaining agreements with police, Teamsters, fire, which is a huge accomplishment coming out of a pandemic and just something to really be proud of, to establish that security for our employees. The board approved one of the biggest budgets, I think, in its history this past a few months ago, which really secured additional positions to support the growth of the airport, additional compensation to keep us competitive with all of our fellow industries out there that are trying to attract talent. We did our first ever board policy on public art, which is fantastic. We're going to hear about that shortly. Hosting the ACI annual conference. So not only did we come out of a year of doing nothing, we had to take on one of the biggest industry events anywhere because they like to come here and because we can do it. And great leadership through that. We dealt with a lot of parking issues and accomplished, as I talked about earlier, remote parking lot and investments in parking to really deal with one of the issues that was being talked about a lot in regards to the airport. Air service by a record 13 airlines to 29 destinations, which is a high water mark and something to be really proud of. A new 50-year lease with the Nevada Air National Guard, a really important partner. We did our new IT master plan, which is just full of really cool stuff, and I think you'll be hearing about it in the years ahead, but really important work. The workspace study, and you were a true driver on this with me, really guiding me and keeping me motivated to figure out better accommodations for our employees, and I appreciate personally your guidance and leadership on that. We were debt-free for the first time. It may not be by the end of this meeting, but we were debt-free under your leadership, sir, which is something any airport should be proud of, and I'm certainly proud of it, and I hope this whole board is as well. And I just want to personally say your calm demeanor, your quiet guidance has helped me many moments when my hair is on fire and it's a lot going on. It's a volatile business. And you're always just that calming influence, and I appreciate that very much, sir. Sean, thank you so much for everything you've done this past year. You did a great job as chair, and we are all, the entire organization, very much in your debt. Thank you.
While there is an I in the word airport, I want to thank this board for putting we in that airport. And each of you this year have done a tremendous job in doing all this list of accomplishments. And the we I really want to thank is this team out here, because day in and day out, they have risen to the challenge not only of COVID, not only of a huge capital improvement program, but our bargaining agreements are all done. That just shows a lot of teamwork. And I wish for one thing for the future, is that you never lose the spirit of this team out here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. So a couple gifts in your honor. First, a plaque with the gavel in recognition of Sean Carey, Chairman of the Board, Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, July 2021 to June 2022. So Sean, there's that. We'll get you want to get a picture with that? Let's get a picture. To drop, it's our parting gift, the Crystal aircraft, which again, Sean Carey, RTAA Chairman, 7/21 to 6 of 22. Thank you so much, Sean. You take that before I drop it. Again, thank you so much.
Pleasure, sir.
Thank you. And before we move on, I want to say thank you to Trustee Carey as well. My first year on the board here and getting to work with him throughout the last 12 months has been a great opportunity for me to learn more about the board and to learn more about the role here as chairman, and really thankful for the time you've taken with me over the last year as well. So thank you. Moving on to item number 8, consent items for board action. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second was trustee Gianoli. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 9.1, Art Master Plan Update.
Thank you so much, Chair Kramer. If my binders are any indication, we've been busy. And good morning, all trustees, CEO Griffin, the RTA team, and special guests. So this is an exciting time for us. I'm so delighted to bring back to the board an update on the resolution that established an arts policy for the RTAA. For all those who love art, and even those who don't, these are some really exciting times, and we're inspired. I am in particular, and I know those who I've spoken with, by your commitment, the board's commitment to diversifying and promoting all cultures at Reno and Stead for the years to come. So great progress has been made in identifying strategies that make sense for our 2 airports and sustain us into the future. And these are important steps that we want to get right. So when the master plan of this groundbreaking program is turned over to the RTAA, it will represent diversity, it'll represent inclusion, and it'll represent the culture of the region. So our focus right now is on the creation of an art advisory committee and the impending RFQ. So to speak a little bit more about that, I'd like to introduce Mark Salinas. Mark is a senior project manager at Forecast Public Art, the consulting firm hired to draft our master plan. Mark is a Reno resident, and for over 20 years, he has served in a variety of roles in public, private, and nonprofit sectors, drafting public art policy, curatorial content, and cultural program management in both rural and urban communities, one of them being Reno's East 4th Street Public Art Project. Mark has worked in London and Paris, and 19 years in New York City, and he has created art plans for over 300 public art projects across the nation, in addition to being honored for multiple awards throughout his career. So I'd like to welcome Mark up to the podium to talk a little bit more about the progress of our master plan.
Morning, everyone. How are you? I'm pleased to be here and share with you an update of what we're doing and the direction that we're facing. Mark Salinas from Forecast Public Art. Forecast Public Art is a non-for-profit organization. It's 43 years old, based in the Twin Cities. It started off by artists, for artists to create opportunities, so those artists' works could be presented in communities. There are 3 main functions of Forecast Public Art. One is that to date we've re-granted $2.9 million to Minnesota artists. I'm also responsible for a nationwide program called Making It Public, where we train artists as well as arts administrators on workforce development to create better and more equitable opportunities for the public. Secondly, like what I'm doing here today, we partner and consult municipalities, state arts organizations, counties, developers, and airports on creating master plans. That could include cultural mapping, percent for art. The image that you see here is the 11th Street Bridge in Washington, D.C., where we cited 5 works of art over the Anacostia River. This elevated bridge is a part of the Highline Network. Lastly, we had a magazine called Public Art Review, and like all things, it went digital. It was around for 3 decades. And what we like to do is take the stories of who we are in touch with across the nation and create educational opportunities to share where local capacity has developed. We believe in the intersection of public art and transportation, public art and health, public art and tourism, and we see public art as a method to bring communities together to help them realize their mission. This is our consulting team. Like Andy said, I'm based here in Reno. We also have someone on the East Coast. A little bit about myself. Thank you, Andy, for the introduction. I myself am self-directed here to the marketing team here in Reno, at the Reno Airport. I moved here from New York City in 2016 and 2018. I approached the marketing team with the idea to have a first-time Carson City exhibition. The reception brought in as many people to fill a 747 Boeing plane. And it represented 3 nonprofit organizations in Carson City. That's the image on the top left. So I've pitched and curated shows here. I've also been a juror for the Employee Art Show. I'm the chair of our local Municipal Arts Commission. I'm on the board for the Pioneer, as well as a governor-appointed board member of the State Arts Agency, Nevada Arts Council. I understand the bar of excellence that this airport wants to achieve across the board. I will be here to bring that to you in public art. And I also carry that bar of excellence in what I do outside. One of my passion projects is a project called The First Lady Presents, which is an initiative I created with Mrs. Sisolak on juxtaposing an artifact from the museum collection of the Carson City Museum to a contemporary artist. And that's an online education program posted on the tourism website. So I'd like this opportunity just to be, so we all get off on the same foot about what a cultural, arts and cultural master plan is. So it's a collection of best procedures informed by community engagement and guided by research, resource, and capacity. And so I want to call your attention to these 3 sentences here, because that is the game plan for our phases. Collection of best, that's understanding, oh, I'm so sorry. That is understanding what's pre-existing here. What is the art history of the organization? What is the aesthetic guidelines for architectural elements? What is the capacity? The second line, informed by community engagement, is going to tell us what the community wants, what they see, and where they see opportunities yet to be discovered. Lastly, is tying this all together by research, resource, and capacity. The last thing I want to do is create a document that sits on someone's shelf or a USB that sits on someone's computer. We want to have an action plan that's measurable within the capacity of staff and resources. These are 3 pillars that I think represent a thriving community as well as a thriving arts program: creation, relation, and education. The creation of an arts and culture master plan, the education of sharing it with you today and to the public, reaching out to the community to create an arts advisory board, and having that arts advisory board be ambassadors of the program itself. Public art master plan, I've studied them from San Francisco to Red Wing, and while geography and population and governance and funding can affect it, there are commonplace bullet points in every action plan. And so this is something that you could say are the chapters of the Arts and Culture Master Plan. So you have everything from organization, governance, funding, determining where and why we place this public art, how we reach out into the community, what we do afterwards. Many people think that once that ribbon cutting is done, that's really when the work begins. The formation of an arts committee is going to create an equitable voice of what the community wants. And their goals as ambassadors will be to provide their recommendations to this board for opportunities related to construction where there's a CIP for art. Sorry. The advisory committee itself will be organized and led by Annie. They will be making recommendations on the selection of public art, both temporary and permanent, and they'll be serving staggered terms. And I feel this is the best way, this is the best practice for such an inaugural committee. Being that I live here in Reno, I was given the opportunity to sort of dream up of like a dream team. Like, who would I want? If I was Andy, who would I want around here? And so we came up with a couple of names here. And these organizations represent diversity. These two organizations up here, statewide. I know that there's been direction on wanting performance and music and dance being incorporated to this plan. And so I thought of our three heavy hitters for music, visual arts, and performing arts. I think because there is going to be an RFQ process, it might be beneficial to have someone from our municipal arts commissions to be there. The Holland Project represents the sweet spot. No matter in what city I work, there's always the goal, the yearning to retain those ages between 18 and 23, wherever I go. Those are going to be the people in this room when we're not here. And then, of course, educational opportunities with Washoe and Sierra. They will be joined by two non-voting members, as well as two appointed members internally. I'm not going to read through all of this, but as I was telling Trustee Cunningham earlier, if a public art master plan, if a public art master plan is a map, the RFQ process is like the destination. If it's a car, this is the destination. There's many steps for an RFQ process. And among all these steps, you'll see 3 committee meetings right there, right there, right there. One committee meeting will be to contribute and edit to the RFQ language. The second one will be to review a top 12. The last one will be to review the top 12 and pick 3 semifinalists, and the last meeting will be for a live presentation of those 3 finalists, and then finally the artist is contracted. Then you'll see here update and artist designs as construction continues. It's very commonplace and, in fact, necessary that planning is adaptable to the actual site itself as construction goes. I also want to draw your attention to this word down here, repeat. I've gone over what the bullet points and what the Art and Culture Master Plan will contain. I've gone over why we need an Arts Advisory Board. I've gone over who we think should be on that. And I've given you an overwhelming glimpse of that RFQ process, which is the heartbeat of where we're working right now on that. I'm going to be turning the corner next month, reaching out, doing some pop-ups here in the airport on both sides of TSA, so we can get a pulse on what people who not only visit here, but also people who work here, and what they want to see and what they want to have arts and culture reflect them and their interests as well. I'm available if there's any questions, digitally and physically right now, if you have any.
Any comments or questions from the board? Trustee Cunningham.
I just want to acknowledge and express my appreciation, the focus and attention that's gone to pulling together a diverse group, whether it be age, ethnic background, city, state, local. Kudos to you and the team. Very well done. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Trustee Sfraza.
I guess just a question, are we advising today on the makeup of the board? Is that coming to us? Because I do see some personally that I think could make it more diverse. I mean, Burning Man's such a huge, important component, a new age of art. Personally, I think someone from that realm should be part of this committee, and maybe someone from tourism as well. So a couple thoughts there, so I didn't know if we were blessing this today, if it's going to go out and we're gonna ask, the board's gonna ask for applications and then we appoint them as the board. I want some kind of control over that process and how we're gonna do that in open process. And I guess that's
Thank
what
you
I'm
for that. This is
asking
just a
today.
presentation, it's a non-action item. It's just a presentation of like where we are right now. Thank you for bringing those two organizations up. One of the priorities I wanted to pull out was making sure that underrepresented organizations who have not had a voice yet are included in that. And so I've gone through all the decades of exhibitions at the Departures Gallery, and I know that Burning Man is a standing one there. And so, you know, when we have these discussions and pull together that group, that task force, we'll really look at who's already at the table and who hasn't been there yet. So thank you for bringing that up. I certainly understand the interest in tourism as well. Annie, I don't know if you wanted to speak a little bit more to this? Okay.
One of the things we also talked about internally is we also want to be mindful of the number of organizations on this committee and not to make it too large to encumber the process of what we have to go through. So your input in terms of types of organizations that you'd like to see a part of it will be very helpful to us when forming that committee. There's also a trustee who will be appointed by Chair Kramer, who will take back to the board and talk to the board a little bit more about the structure of that advisory committee. So that's our path moving forward.
Is this coming back to us? I feel like it's only on for information, but I do have concern. The other one is the generator. I mean, they're massive over in Sparks. Everything they're doing at Audi, these are local artists. I just want more of a flavor, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but I would like to see a couple of those added or even modified. That's a cool thing that they're doing over there in the Audi district, and it'd be neat to get those new faces at the table too on part of these, boards and committees. I'd really like to see that included in the list.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Chair Kramer, please.
Yeah, I would agree very much with Trustees Ferraza. This is something that was obviously very important to the whole board, and in particular Trustees Ferraza, Trustee Cunningham, myself. I mean, the whole board really was very involved in this. And as I just to echo the comment that I think is really important, is part of what we are trying to also capture in absolutely the diversity of our community is also some of the things the community is known for. I don't want to shy away from that. Burning Man is definitely one of the things that is a staple of this community, or the generator out in Sparks, where we can feature this as well. So I think that this is a really important point from Trustees Ferraza here that really does need to be addressed.
Absolutely, and actually starting in August, we'll have a Burning Man exhibit like we do every year. So we support and understand their importance within the organization, and within that RFQ process as well. I'll just talk a little bit to that. We are really very much getting out to the local arts communities, our desire for them to be part of what we're doing, not only in terms of the organization, but in terms of providing art here at the airport. So just to your point, we do subscribe to making sure that it's a complete committee, and people that you all also want to see as part of a committee that makes decisions and brings to you to make decisions. So
I'm curious, are we appointing this committee, opening this up for applications within those different groups? Like, that's...
So that was not the intention. The intention was not to necessarily open it up to the board to decide who was on the committee. However, if that's the desire of the board, we can certainly circle back and determine how best to do that based on who Chair Kramer appoints to the advisory committee from the board, and then circle back. We are in a bit of a time crunch. This master plan, the way it usually transpires, is one that is formed first, and then a committee is formed after, and then the RFQ subsequently precedes that. But because the construction project is impending and starts in September, and our desire to try and get most of that art done before the ticketing project is finished, things have had to flip around a bit within the master plan to attack things first, and the advisory committee is one of them, because we really can't put an RFQ out until we have an advisory committee formed who can review that and be part of the process.
I guess I just envision this very differently, that we would get recommendations from our consultant, what groups we wanted to see, and then we would open it up under those categories. I mean, but guess other suggestions from the board, then it's a staff-driven picking who's on this arts board.
Chair. It's a delicate balance of, one, meeting the timeline, and two, relying on the expertise of people that live in this area that work in the fine arts field. That's why we've hired Mark. I think your suggestions, Trustee Safraza, are great ones, and we can bring the committee back for board approval if that makes you more comfortable. I don't want it to be a board-driven process where the board is reviewing applications and things like that. That I think is a level we don't want to get into. But I definitely hear you on your interest and desire on the makeup of the committee, and I think we can absolutely satisfy that and keep their process moving. And the driver here, again, is the ticket hall project. We're getting ready to open bids next month on that, and design is almost done, so we're trying to push everything along as fast as we can.
What is a way that we can get, because this is, the impetus for this was obviously driven by the board. We do have obviously some opinions on this as well, and I do want to make sure that that's captured into this. Kaplan?
I wanted to clarify, because I thought I saw on your list that there was a trustee that was on this committee. Is that correct? Yes. And when do you ask for that interest?
So next month, when we put out the call for all board members that are interested in any of the various liaison roles or committees, this is a new one that's being added, which is basically a trustee liaison to this committee. Anybody who's interested in serving in that role will raise their hand. Chair Kramer will appoint one, and basically they will begin immediately based on where we're at in this process and providing board input to the process.
And for the record, that's not me, because I don't know anything about art. I'm happy to enjoy it when it's installed. I was just wondering if that would be an appropriate time for the board trust, or our representative from the board to weigh in on the process.
I really look forward to working with a board trustee on this. I promise you that. It is a very detailed and important number of processes that we'll have to get right, because it's a new program here. And we want to make sure it gets done right so that it leads us to Mark's repeat in the future, and that we're prepared and we're ready for what's to come. So I really do look forward to working with the trustee who's selected, and this is it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a lot of work.
I guess a follow-up question: if we're choosing the trustee next month, why wouldn't we just put this out and then choose them all next month? So if we're not choosing, I guess if it's a quick timeline, then why wouldn't we put this out under these qualifications, then bring that back and have us appoint the board members?
Mark, can you talk more about the process with each of those organizations?
This cross-section of our region that you see up on the board, the recommendation was to send a letter of invitation to these organizations so that they self-appoint a representative from their group to part of this task.
Mr. Chair?
And please, I could just finish that one thought. And so we would need to offer them at least a month during the summer for them to convene under posting and notices like that to self-appoint, if some of these have a public process like the municipal ones up there.
Yes, please.
CEO Griffin and then Trustee Rose.
So, Trustee Safraza, just to follow up on that, the process that Mark has described is pretty much exactly what we followed at the last place I worked when we had a major public art effort going. The self-appointment was really important because this is a time commitment, and this committee is gonna be grinding through a lot of things, and having people that were showing up and invested in this is really important. Also, having their subject matter expertise on the committee was important to the airport, because we're in the airport business. We are not in the art business, and understanding what they bring to the table. And I can tell you these conversations can get very robust and divergent opinions. And ultimately what we're asking this group to do is bring to this board recommendations, hopefully, of having vetted what's available on the locations that we have or the different artists and what they would recommend to you. And ultimately, this is the decision-making body, as Mark has outlined. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just had a clarifying question. On this advisory committee prospect list, when you send out the request and they send back who they want to appoint from their organization, will you be taking into consideration the role of that person within the organization? And maybe if they don't have a top level person available to commit this kind of time, then maybe they would come off and another organization might make it on that has a higher level appointee. Will that be part of the process, or are we just going to take whoever they appoint because we want everyone from this list?
Good question. So thank you. So the letter of invitation would come from the CEO, and with that letter would be the roles and responsibility and time commitment, as well as that RFQ timeline, a little bit more detailed so that they know the time obligation and commitment. Those letters will go to the EDs of all those organizations, and the intent there is that they would make the best decision among their staff who's the most capable of representing the task vis-a-vis the responsibilities that's attached to that letter.
But the most capable person isn't always available. So if their most capable person is not available and they
Can
send
include
someone,
that language in the letter
if
if
they
you'd like.
want to send someone else, are we allowing that, or do we then have the opportunity to say this isn't going to work for us?
I think the Bar of Excellence will be communicated in that letter to make sure that they are appointing someone who's going to be a help, not a hindrance, someone who's going to be a stellar committee member.
Just make one last pitch. I guess Burning Man is the largest generator of service to the airport. I mean, it's the largest generator of flights here at Reno. I think not to have them on the committee is a mistake. And I think that the generator would feel slighted if we did not allow someone from that organization to serve. They're doing a huge project in Sparks. It's a redevelopment of their area. So I'm okay with them self-appointing, but I do think those two organizations should be represented on the committee.
I agree with you, Trustees Fraza.
I just want to be clear. Our letter will very clearly, to Jennifer Rose's comment, very clearly speak to an invitation to the executive director. And although that person may not have the time to commit to the organization, we will clearly have language in there and a right of first refusal on our part to make sure diversity is included and all of that, and somebody is capable. And these are rotating terms, so we will continue to be involved in that process moving forward, absolutely.
Can I please get a commitment on the record about having the generator and Burning Man as part of this advisory committee?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You have my commitment.
Can I make
We'll
one final
extend those
comment?
invitations.
Can I make one final
Please,
comment?
Trustee Rose.
I just want to say that I really believe in Annie and Amanda's capabilities, and I have no doubt that you guys are going to do a fabulous job. I'm so pleased to see your names as the employee liaisons. That makes me very happy, and I have complete faith in you, and I appreciate you adding those and getting that commitment and reassuring me on who you'll accept throughout these organizations. So good luck with everything.
Any other comments from the board? Thank you both so much.
time.
Moving on to item number 9.2, public hearing. Do I need to? Oh, I have a script. Now is the time, place, and manner set forth the public hearing to be conducted pursuant to Section 147F of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 with respect to the proposed issuance of airport system revenue bonds by the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, Nevada, in the maximum aggregate principal amount of $50 million. The bonds are to be issued for the purpose of financing a portion of the costs of acquiring, constructing, improving, and equipping facilities and certain supplemental facilities within the Reno Tahoe International Airport and its environs, located at 2001 East Plum Lane, Reno, Nevada 89502, and within the Reno Stead Airport and its environs, located at 4895 Texas Avenue, Reno, Nevada 89506, collectively the airports, including without limitation terminals, hangars, runways and taxiways, aprons, roads, parking lots, and other structures, administration and office buildings, and additional facilities thereat, which are necessary or convenient to the development of the airports and paying related costs, collectively the project. Members of the public are invited to comment with respect to the issuance of bonds or the project. Is there anyone present who wishes to comment? Let the minutes of this hearing reflect that no one has appeared at this hearing to comment on the issuance of the bonds or the project, and no written comments have been received prior to this hearing. Public hearing with respect to the issuance of the bonds and the project is now concluded. Moving on to item 9.3. Board memo, adoption of the resolution number 559 approving a non-revolving credit agreement for the issuance of the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority. Randy.
Good morning, Chair. Chair Kramer, members of the board, and thank you for reading into the record that rather lengthy script. It does check a rather essential box in the tax code that whenever a public agency enters into a decision where bonds will be issued, that the public has an opportunity to go on the record and speak to it. Okay, today we're going to talk about an interim financing program. It's a program that we've provided some background to the board previously at the board workshops, and we discussed rather lengthily at the Finance Committee on Tuesday. And I want to start just by sharing your enthusiasm for more R&O. And we also share something else, and that's the fiscal responsibility for how we go about paying for some of our major capital improvements. And today we'll be talking about one tool out of the toolbox that we'll be using to move this program forward. It's just one part of a larger financial plan that we have for the airport to address all of our operating and capital needs. And we are working on that model that will cover for the next 30 years, and we'll be providing the board more information along the way as we bring forward other financing techniques. All right, a little overview of today. We had the public hearing. There were no comments or testimony opposing this or supporting it. We'll be talking about how we go about financing our capital improvements, a little bit of Airport 101 financing, and then we'll talk about the specific plan of finance that we're recommending today. I want to just introduce briefly the financing team. You'll see that we have some significant local presence on that team. Then we'll talk about the bank selection process and the bank that we're partnering with. And finally, we'll conclude with the staff recommendation. So today, the alternatives of how we go about financing capital improvements, there is cash. We refer to that as pay-go, pay-as-you-go type of financing where we draw from our days cash on hand. And that financial model that I mentioned earlier does take a look at our use of cash over that 30-year period, and we have a target level of about 400 days, where in comparison to where we are today of about 530, that demonstrates from a modeling standpoint that we will be drawing down our days cash on hand in addition to using these other programs. And we'll be using these programs together in combination and support of one another. Federal programs you're familiar with, AIP funds approximately 93% of our FAA-approved construction. A good example is the runway and taxiways. We are seeking grants at every opportunity we can to help augment our capital funding needs. We are active with our legislative delegation to ensure that they are hearing our needs for investment here at RNO and at STED. There are other programs called TIFIA, which is a federal loan program, and of course we'll be looking at that as an alternative if it should fit our particular needs. Then there comes bond financing. There's two types of bond financings. There's short-term and there's long-term. Other sources, of course, we're always asking the question, we're always accepting of any potential funding opportunity that should become available to us. Considerations whenever we talk about financing our capital program is, what's a prudent level of cash? What's a prudent level of debt? We certainly do not want to incur so much debt that it constrains us in our operating capacity going forward. And if there's one lesson learned from the pandemic is that debt can be constraining. When we look at our peer airports and as their operating revenues declined as ours did, they were throwing everything they had into paying their debt service. Unfortunately speaking, no airport throughout the country went into default on their bonds. We're an airport that's concerned about air service and being competitive. As we discuss this plan with our airline partners, they are a party to this, our decision going forward in our capital campaign. So we need to ensure that we have a competitive program that addresses their needs as well. Today, we'll be focusing more on the interim and short-term category. The specific plan, and I may refer to this as a letter of credit. This is just, those are just my words that I attach to it that perhaps is just to simplify a rather lengthy description of what we call the non-revolving bond loan program. But it is a program that provides us with $50 million of capacity, primarily to fund our more RNO projects on a cash flow basis. And this is just a tool, the same as we have the ability to, and approval from the board to write checks to pay for our capital improvements. This is just another payment mechanism of how we go about paying the bills as they come in. It is a ready-to-go financing mechanism so that we have the ability to draw down from this facility when we have those larger milestone obligations to fulfill. I think of it as a bridge between now and when we put together our long-term bond program, which I would anticipate to incur within the 2 and 3 year time period. This particular note comes due in 3 years, and I'll get into some of those terms in a moment. It's a right-sizing type of technique because compared to a conventional bond issue, you issue the bonds and all that money goes into the bank account and it sits there until you need it and you draw it down to pay for your milestones. This happens similar to a construction loan concept where you have the authorization and you just borrow what you need when you need it, and you pay the interest only on what's borrowed. So I say a hedge against interest rates. We're in a rising interest rate environment. This type of borrowing instrument is the interest is set on the shorter term of that yield curve, where you're seeing higher yields, higher interest cost day in and day out. This is at the shorter end where the cost of borrowing is lower. We are using this as a tool to maintain our days cash on hand to fulfill our obligation to the board's policy that we hit that 365-day cash on hand target. And the last bullet point in that category is something that I've mentioned before, and it's somewhat of a creative finance, in that I would call creative financing, when the legislation for CARES, CRISA, ARPA, when that was written, it had a list of what is eligible, what is not eligible, and the number one item on that in terms of eligibility was paying debt service. So we're able to use our CARES Act to retire a good portion of this obligation as we draw down amounts, we can then turn around and reimburse that loan with CARES Act. There are some considerations, and there's always two sides to the coin. There's a commitment fee that we're obligated to pay, and I'll talk about those terms in a moment. But the one point I want to leave you with is that there is some risk. It's a risk that I'm comfortable recommending. It's called market access risk, so that in 3 years, when this note becomes due, will we as an airport have access to the capital markets to refinance any balance that might be out there? Capital markets they continue to demonstrate their ability to fulfill the needs of public agencies throughout recessions, throughout crises, and I am not concerned with that particular risk. All right, let me introduce the financing team. This has been something that we've been working on for the past 6 months and preparing the documents, and we're all ready to close this transaction on August 3rd. I want to start with introducing Brian Gallucci from Public Financial Management. He's joining us virtually. Brian works closely with the RTAA staff, and he also works closely with the staff of Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas. Bond counsel firm Sherman and Howard, and in the audience today is Ryan Henry, the lead counsel for this transaction. He is also a member of the local office here of Sherman and Howard. General counsel, we have our very own Ann Morgan, who has assisted us with this. And then, not on the slide, but in the audience, I want to introduce Patrick Foley, who is the Wells Fargo bank representative that we've been working with. All right, so the bank selection process was solicited through a request for proposal process managed by PFM, and they sent it to 35 banks that provide products in this particular space. And we received 4 qualified proposals from BMO Harris, JP Morgan, US Bank, and Wells Fargo Bank. PFM crunched the numbers, they analyzed all the different terms, they summarized them for staff, and in the final analysis, it was a bit of a jump ball between JP Morgan and Wells Fargo. We're very grateful for having such competitive proposals, but in the end, Wells Fargo did have the most cost-competitive proposal of the 2 banks. So that is the basis of the recommendation is cost. We also will say that we appreciate the partnership and the local presence of Wells Fargo as well. So Wells Fargo, and in their qualifications, let me speak to a few things. They are a well-known provider of this type of product in the municipal sector. They are a local bank. They have very strong credit ratings for a bank, and they have good experience in this type of product at other airports, Harry Reid, Orlando, Dallas-Fort Worth, just to name a few. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the terms of the note and how it works. And I will be incorporating some comments as a response to a question that Trustee Rose had surfaced earlier. And hopefully I'll be able to address those questions before I get to the end of the next couple of slides. This particular type of note is authorized by the Nevada revised statutes. It's a non-revolving 3-year loan. Now, I said letter of credit earlier, and that's where it might be different is that a traditional letter of credit, when you draw it down and pay it back, your capacity goes back up. But it doesn't work that way, because in the state of Nevada, the law prohibits that type of a revolving account. So we have to do this on a non-revolving basis. That's not to say that if $50 million isn't enough, and it may not be enough, we can certainly do more. We can go back to Wells Fargo, ask for a minute. We can do another RFP process and seek other proposals and have them layer on top of one another. That's not a constraint by any means. There is this commitment fee of 20 basis points, or 0.2% of 1% on the undrawn amount, and on a $50 million credit level, it's $100,000 per year, and that amount will go down as we draw from it. When we do draw from it, there is an interest cost associated with the drawn amount. And I've provided you a little bit of math here on how that works. There's two, I would say, tranches in this particular bond deal. One is referred to as tax exempt, and the other one is taxable. And that's the interest rate that's paid on the bonds. Taxable rate is higher, and it would be on any type of draw that's based on a private sector or a business that's conducted here on the airport that is not eligible, as we are as a public agency, to receive tax-exempt type of treatment when we issue bonds. So the rate is a little higher for those instances, which I do not anticipate that there would be much of, but it gives us the flexibility to do that if we chose to. Here's an example of the math and how it works. SOFR is the acronym for Secured Overnight Financing Rate. You may have heard of LIBOR. LIBOR is also a short-term index, but it's also being phased out. And so this is the new replacement for that type of index. It's the interest rates at the shorter term of the yield curve. That's why it is so low. And the math, the way it works for the tax-exempt draws, is it takes 80% of that SOFR rate and then adds 46 basis points. And the result, if it were based upon that rate of June 22nd, would be 1.62% per annum. So that's the benefit of being a quasi-public agency. We're able to issue tax, exempt obligations. All right, so how it works, and this is the additional information that I've added to the slide deck following our discussion with the Financing Committee. I already made the point that it functions much like a construction loan. And perhaps I was remiss at the Finance Committee to not be clear that we're using this instrument only for instances that the board has already approved a contract or given us authorization to write checks or to fulfill a financial obligation. We have that approval and authority from you already, and this is just a mechanism. How we pay for things, we pay for things through wires and checks. That's an administrative task, and that's something that we do not bring back to the board. We certainly inform you of the status of our fiscal results each month. And what we proposed and discussed at the Finance Committee to address this question of should there be a decision point for the board each time we draw. We talked about that internally, and it's really not practical, honestly, to do that, and it defeats somewhat the purpose of the utility of having the flexibility of drawing this down as needed. And knowing that we already have board approval, we have that legislative input whenever we have a contract that you approve. We, as a compromise, suggested from staff that we include a section in our monthly operating statement that recaps the status of the note. It describes how we've used it, when we used it, and for what for, and any remaining balance. And of course, it's always reported in our audited financial results. And that leaves with you the recommendation from staff that together with the Finance Committee recommendation, we ask that the board approve resolution number 559. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Trustee Rose.
So just for clarification, what lingered at the Finance Committee meeting, we had a lot of questions about this. We had a great conversation about it. Randy did a fabulous job. I think everyone at the Finance Committee is in favor of the overall project. However, the one thing that kind of came up during that meeting was a $50 million non-revolving line of credit where the board wasn't approving the draw or knowing how much or what it would be used for, those types of things. And what came to be was that it was not the intention of the airport to bring that to the board, But if it was the board's wishes, they could and would. And then there was a conversation about if they didn't bring it back to the board, we could put it as a standing item on the agenda at the finance committee meeting and get an update each month about what they'd done and what they had used it for. There was, conversation and concern, obviously, that we're probably heading into a recession and, that could maybe affect some different things moving forward. So my position at the end of all of that was, because it's $50 million, I wasn't really comfortable saying, I'm good with you not bringing it to the board, or I want to insist that you do bring it to the board. I felt like it needed to be the wishes of the majority of the full board and not just my personal, feelings about it. I'm not going to lie, I have mixed emotions. I understand the benefits of not doing it. I understand there are going to be people here probably that feel like it needs to be done. So I felt like we needed to have an honest, healthy discussion about how the entire board feels. And if the majority of the board wants to say that they want it brought to the board before they draw, that's fine. And if the majority of the board feels comfortable with it, with the intention that it was brought to us, then that's okay too. But I did not want to make that decision for the rest of you.
Trustee Giannoli.
Just to follow up on that, because we did have a lengthy discussion. And I totally understand, because I had the question too, but we kind of limit and hamstring you if we have you come to the board and it's a month out, because part of the reason this vehicle is unique and good for us is that we can react, whether it be a construction contract and its timing of money, timing of interest rates. So I get the idea behind it, and I still, it's $50 million, as Jennifer said, but what you stated in that we've approved all these things. It's not like you're going out and getting money for something that we haven't already endorsed. So in my mind now, I'm comfortable that you come back to us on a regular basis as a regular reporting, and we know what's being done. If we were just going to give you an open checkbook and you were going to go one day and do something that we've never seen, I think that's a different animal. But if we force you to come back to us, we lose the ability and the reason that we're doing this, which is to be nimble, as you said in your board item. So, I'm certainly willing to listen to everyone else, and I had the concerns and I asked the questions at the Finance Committee, but I understand what the tool is there for and why you chose to do it this way.
Ms. Fraza.
I guess I didn't see in the staff report, what was the difference between the JP Morgan and the Wells Fargo terms?
That was a question we asked at the Finance Committee meeting too.
Yeah, I just didn't see it listed. Usually it's listed in this.
That's a very good question. Trustee Ferraza, asking for clarification on the differences in the fees. As I indicated before, it's very close at the end, and there's two elements to the fee. There's that commitment fee part, just to have the capacity to draw down $50 million as needed. And when we look at that particular fee, the Wells Fargo proposal was 20 basis points, and the JP Morgan was 22 basis points, so very close. But when we look at the rate that's used on the drawdown amounts, okay, that's the second piece. JP Morgan was 45 basis points, and Wells Fargo was 46 basis points, so it's 1 basis point higher. So you had 2 basis points better on the commitment fee, and almost the same on the drawdown amount. So it was very, very close. There were some additional terms that were taken into consideration. There were some fees by being charged by JP Morgan for each transaction, not consequential, but there was still the transaction fee, where, you know, we do not have that fee with Wells Fargo.
But if we could just get that in the staff report, I mean, for the record, it would just be helpful to see, usually you guys give like, here's the difference. It would cost us this much more if we went to JP Morgan, just so we have that information, because this is a big note. And I just want to make sure it's clear in the record why we're going this way. So I don't know, Randy, if you have that figure of what that cost difference would be if we, based on what you're telling us, if we had gone with JP Morgan.
I could do some math in my head and tell you at the, you know, the commitment fee, you know, that we're looking at, you know, $100,000 versus $100,000 that cost differential.
Basis points, I heard you say that Wells was 46 and Chase was 45.
That's right.
So
that would be the difference between on the assumption of $1 million. That would be the difference of between. And I'm just doing some math off the cuff here. You know, with the Wells Fargo, that's $19,500 per year on $1 million of drawn amount, and with the JP Morgan, it would be approximately $19,000 per year.
Yeah, if we could just get that added, this is such a big dollar amount. I just want to have that in the record when we're going with one financial institution over another. And then I want to clarify based on Trustee Rose, because I think that's a good point. I just want to understand, so do we have a list of what this money is intended on being used for?
I asked the question at the Finance Committee meeting on when we felt we would use it first and what we might use it on. That was one of my questions, because I don't think we know over the course of 3 years. But the answer I received was the ticketing hall.
The ticketing hall is the first project we anticipate using these funds for, and there are some elements of that project that that are CARES eligible, and we'll be using CARES to repay that part of the debt. There's also other projects. We have, you know, somewhere between $40 and $50 million anticipated for an RTAA admin facility plus a public safety center. We have approximately $50 million, and these are just you know on the wall estimates. They're not fine tuned, but we have another $50 million of land site identified projects that will require some cash flow funding. And then, of course, you know, we have the larger concourse projects, which will come to fruition over the coming months when we finish design and have better cost estimates. And also, as I indicated earlier, it's a partnership decision with the airlines in terms of how we go about paying for and the scope of those projects. Those conversations are underway.
Just based on Trustee Gianoli, I just want to make sure I understand the process. So the bid would come back to us, and we'd approve that contract, and then you guys would be like, "Hey, we're going to use the revolving loan to pay for it." So we're approving for the project first, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
you know,
All right. I'm okay with that then. As long as we're approving, it's just giving staff the flexibility to get the
That's right.
funds, correct? Okay.
I guess the only difference is that, and I'm totally fine with it, I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're agreeing to. If we are going to approve the project, but we're probably not going to know at the time that we approve the project that they're planning to use the line of credit to fund it. But I will say, and this is an important positive point that made me feel a lot better, the revolving, non-revolving, important word, non-revolving line of credit, got to say it right, is for 50 million, but we still have $20 million of CARES Act money that we've never spent that we can use to pay back on this. So the dollar amount is not really as big as it seems. And once I identified that and that money was approved, already pre-approved for this type of thing, then I felt a lot better, that I felt a lot more comfortable with it. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands, because later, it could get where people say, oh, I didn't understand it that way. I just want to make sure everybody understands. I don't have an issue with it. I just want to make sure everybody understands.
Because you gotta have staff be able to get locked.
Yeah, exactly.
Trustees Fraza, microphone, please.
I was just saying that gives staff the flexibility to lock in the good interest rate, and we wanted to,
Yeah, especially as the Fed's talking about a 75,
right.
75 basis point raise on interest rates and other things that'll affect us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to add a little more emphasis to this. The board's approval here is the approval for us to access this as a source of funds. And rare is the airport project that is funded from a single source of money. We have AIP grants that come in, passenger facility charges, customer facility charges, our own funds, all kinds of different sources. And oftentimes the challenges of the finance team is to peanut butter the different sources together to make a project fully funded. But it is industry standard practice to have multiple sources of funds. This is one more source for us to access to either bridge finance, initially pay for something and then pay ourselves back, but it really is just a cash management tool. In no way, shape, or form are you authorizing us to spend anything that you will see. In fact, you'll see it today. Items coming before you that you have to approve. We may or may not use this line of credit to fund that or some portion of that until we get to what will be major bond issuances a few years from now that this board will also approve, where we'll bake in the long-term debt here. So it's just a tool is really all it is. It's not any form of circumventing your approval authority.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve or any other questions?
I'll move to approve as presented.
I'll second that.
Before taking a vote, I want to read a statement from Trustee Jay. Please note that I am declaring a conflict of interest on an upcoming board agenda item for the July board meeting. Wells Fargo's proposals will be presented and voted. As an employee of Wells Fargo Advisory FinNet, an affiliate of Wells Fargo, I must recuse myself from the discussion and vote. I will not be at the meeting as I am out of the country, but wanted the statement entered into the minutes. With that, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Randy.
Consideration.
Adam, can I make a comment to Mr. Wells Fargo? I just want to say in my world, when you do a proposal and you're that close to your competitor and you win, we call that genius. You didn't leave a penny on the table.
Moving on to agenda item 9.4. This one was heard at the Finance Committee. Does this board want to have further discussion about this item?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Trustee Carey would like that. So please, Holly.
Not as tall as Randy, that's for sure. So just setting the stage a little bit, Chair Kramer, thank you, and trustees and CEO Griffin and staff. Holly Luna, purchasing manager for the record. And again, setting the stage just a little bit, this item did come before the June Finance and Planning Committee. It didn't go to the board. The intent was to take it to the June Finance Committee, get feedback, incorporate any of that feedback, and then we would be back and present it to the full board. So that's what we've done. We've also made it a few adjustments based on that feedback, and I'll make sure to point out what those adjustments are. And now we're returning for your final approval on Resolution 557. So a little bit of background. We were in front of the board just a little bit over a year ago in March. And prior to that, the existing resolution that had been in place had been there since January of 2006. So it's not very frequent that we come back to you with these types of things, but we thought it important that we do come back now. There's some timely changes that need to occur. Last year, we did a massive overhauling from that January 2006 resolution. And you approved some major revisions. We did a lot of realigning and modernizing the language to bring it into alignment with what NRS states for both 332, which is the Local Government Purchasing Act, and 338, which is Public Works. We revised the change order and amendment process. We made really clear boundaries, establishing that we didn't want things to be repetitively change ordered or amended. So we put a cap in there, which was based on the sum of net, not just repeated change orders. We also add signature authority for the revenue generating contracts, which really resides in the airport economic development world and not mine. But I'm clearly putting those two together. And if we have questions specifically on those, I know we have some assistance from the audience over here. And we also made a very clear and good reporting system back to the board. We do those reports with the Finance Committee on a monthly basis. And you see anything that transpired during that prior month, essentially anything that was authorized using the signature authority, as well as any and all change orders and amendments. I think the thing that I want to emphasize is that the signature authority is obviously subject to budget approval. Every year, the board approves, just like you did in May. You approve the fiscal guidance and the parameters for the RTAA. So if an item in question is not budgeted, then this resolution does not apply to it, and that item would have to come in front of the board regardless of the amount. So what we're specifically concentrating on with this resolution is all the budgeted items. Additionally, every month, as I had talked about, the expenditure and the revenue administrative reports, they're submitted to the Finance and Business Development Committee, and these reflect all signature authority transactions that are $25,000 above. The reason we use that $25,000 is because that's explicitly in NRS 338 as it relates to construction. So just to make things even and simple, we've applied it to across the board. This not only aligns, as I stated, with the Public Works, but it's also a tool that we're using then to keep the board informed of everything that's transpired by the various departments that's within this resolution authority. One thing I want to point out too is why we're back is the CEO and the executive team have reviewed the needs of all of their individual departments and divisions, and we are requesting the new resolution based on this. So what has happened since last March? Nothing, right? Everything has happened since last March. I don't really need to review this long laundry list with you. You're very aware of all of the challenges that we've been dealing with. In the meantime, obviously, there's been some very aggressive moving forward with our intensive capital program, which is going to require us to be highly nimble, flexible, and responsive in our procurement. And that's obviously encapsulated in this new signature authorization resolution. What I did want to point out and take a little bit of time before we jump into some of the meat of the differences and the changes in the resolution is I want to talk about some of the things that have caused a little bit of a hiccup and why we're bringing this back, and just give you some clarity on some examples of challenges that we've run into. One of the items that had come before the Planning and Construction Committee, and then it went to the board, if you'll recall, and I want to say it was back in April or May, we had a Tolls Development Airway Commerce facility, which was Home Gardens, and we needed a professional services agreement from a specialized company to assist us in the operational impact analysis. This particular operational impact analysis was very time sensitive and crucial to this project being able to move forward. The full scope of the services of that was $73,000, which was clearly over the existing $50,000 for the professional services. We split that. That's a no-no in my world, right? We don't want to do that just to get around some resolution. Now, if you look at it through the perspective of the lens of what we initially agreed to, it was about $38,000. And then I requested that staff bring that amendment back to the board. So even though the amendment would have been within the authority, it made me uncomfortable, and staff agreed to bring that back to the board. But you can see that with that split out then, we were limiting ourselves on completing that operational impact analysis. So that's obviously going to be addressed through what's being requested today. There's also numerous projects that have come forward that require the construction management services. Currently, that is we're contracted with Atkins. And every project that comes forward, there's obviously a percentage fee for them to manage the construction management on that project. And those are called work orders. So although it's PSA related and amendment related, it's really specifically associated with those construction projects. Many of those exceed 50K. And so cumulatively speaking, when we're talking about the parameters of this resolution, we have to come back to the board for every single one of those work order changes, and that's also causing a lot of restriction based on staff time. And we want to be able to have their efforts more motivated towards the actual planning and construction. And so you'll see that in here as a new item that we'd like to have the approval on. Those are just a few of the examples that have happened recently, but there's numerous ones. We don't necessarily know what we're facing over the next 8 to 10 years, but we really want to be nimble. So with that, I want to show the differences of what we're asking. So in the old resolution, 550, it's in the left column, and then on the new proposed is in 557. So construction contracts, we're specifically requesting moving from the 250 limitation to the 500,000 limitation. The change orders, again, this is that one that we created the change last year, which is the sum of the total net. So it's not piecemealing anymore, and that's moving from 100,000 to 250,000. Anything above those marks would obviously come back to the board. The professional services agreement. This is the one that when we had brought it in front of the finance and development committee that it was questioned, and so we had a higher number on this before. We've brought that down. It would be moving from 50,000 to 200,000. And then again, we left this one unchanged on the amendments piece of the PSA. The reason for that is because as you're developing a PSA, the intent obviously is that you should be developing a well-defined scope of work, and that the amendments to that PSA should be minimalistic. And so with that, we've left that unchanged. If it does rise above that, we'll be back in front of the board to have that amendment conversation. And then this is the line item that's new, which is the work order construction management services only. This is an amendment to a PSA, if you will. Again, this is the Atkins construction management piece. But again, this resolves the issue of time and time again, planning and engineering and construction staff having to come back in front of you for these individual work orders. And then there's my all other bucket, right? I got to capture it somehow. But this is everything from when we're purchasing goods, materials, technical services, maintenance contracts, software, a lot of those types of things. And that's moving from the 100,000 to the 250,000 mark. I'm going to pause real quick on that. Is there any questions on that?
Here. Please. My area of concern here is in the area of construction contracts. When we let a contract, we have gone through a board process and we've adopted that, and we know what the scope of work is. We then have a contractor, he finds conditions which are different, or the staff sees an opportunity. And I'm just worried about that step of oversight. Once we approve a contract, these change orders under these amounts, largely I'm going to miss that information of knowing what's occurring, what's different, and that helps me as a trustee to have the ability to make sure we're staying on the project and not adding things which should have been in there. And that gives us the ability, I think, to do the trust part of the word trustee, where we're looking at particularly these construction contracts to make sure we're getting good plans from good engineers and good contractors, and our staff has the tools, they move efficiently. But I want to be able to judge that. And I'm just concerned that in some of these projects, which are $250,000, those types of projects, they could be incremental to something. And if that information is missing, I just have some concerns there. How would you address that concern?
And just to be clear, you're talking about the movement of the 100,000 to the 250. Is that what your concern is on the
Yes,
change orders?
yes.
Okay. So there's a couple ways to address that. Currently, we already have that 100,000 in place. So it's a matter of preference for you and your judgment of the 100,000 to the 250 and whether that's suitable or not. But what was changed in last year's resolution is when that original construction contract comes to you, they've also requested at the same time a percentage of the owner's contingency portion.
Correct.
So in my mind, this piece right here with the construction change orders, it's really for those smaller construction contracts. They're already presenting to you an owner's contingency amount, which, you know, depending on the type of project, could be as low as 10%. Maybe if it's something that, you know, has a lot of unknowns, it could be as high as, you know, 20, 25%. So the first thing they're already doing is they're asking for that permission up front when they present that item to you as a board member. The second thing is that when those, any change order, whether it's an owner's contingency or whether it's one of these, which is specific, a contract change order, construction change order, those do come to you on the board report. That is an after the fact. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
But would that report include the understanding which helps us look into the future as to what occurred? Is it just a report of this happened, this how much money, or are we going to understand what was lacking in the original documents, what the change conditions were in the field, and how does it affect the outcome? Because I don't want to have so much control of that, but I'm trying to get at my duty as a trustee to make sure that I'm accounting for the money and the performance of that money.
So one of the things that we can do, we don't currently do it, but there's nothing that says we can't. So to me, this is about an informational item and giving you the information that you need in order to either feel comfortable or that you're, you know, we're getting your questions answered. So right now, the admin report only describes the context of the date, the vendor, the amount, what number of change order it is, and then I always give a summary of what's the total new amount. What we can add to that is the actual change order itself. On that construction change order or on the owner's contingency change order, there's obviously much more detail. And we can include on that as much detail as you're requesting, and if you're not getting sufficient, we can ensure that that's, you know, we're revising and revamping that specific submittal. So you'd have my admin report, and then you would have the backup detail to it if that is something that you're requesting.
I would really appreciate that solution. That seems to put a balance on it. That allows us to judge you know, what's occurring there and leaves some room for us to get at quality improvements. So
Certainly, we'll make sure we'll do that going forward.
thank you.
Trustees Praza?
Yeah, explain to me how this would work, like the professional services agreement. Would this just give our CEO the authority to go out and enter into contracts for $200,000 without going to bid?
No. So all of the requirements of NRS are still in place. So I have a responsibility to maintain all of our processes and make sure that they still align with NRS. So right now under 332, our requirement is we have an informal, kind of a really informal, which goes up to about 50,000, and then there's more of a more dedicated informal, which goes from 50 to 100, and then there's the requirement for formal solicitations at 100,000. Those processes are still going to be maintained. Same thing happens on the construction side. We have what I'll call a really informal up to the 25,000 mark, and then from 25,000 to 100, we have a more outlined informal, but it's still informal. And then we have a required formal bid at 100,000. So regardless of what type of transaction it is, we still have to adhere to the requirements regardless of the signature authority.
So, but I understand the initial one. You'd have to go out to RFP or RFQ, whatever you decided. But then when you award that, it wouldn't come to the board if it was under 200,000.
Correct.
Correct. And then if you had extensions on it, so you have a 3-year contract with 2 3-year extensions, right? Then you could extend it without going back out to RFP or RFQ through those extensions, right?
Correct. However, it would have to come back to the board if those extensions exceed our authority.
Exceed the 200,000. Okay, I just want to make sure because when Trustee Sfraza asked that question, I was just thinking, yes, she's right. The RFP would have to be done, but the board wouldn't necessarily vote on who the winner was. That's okay.
Correct. And one of the things I want to make really clear is we are trying to get to the point where we're minimizing these returns for requests for every year coming back. So in theory, what we would like to do is you take an RFP. We want probably at a minimum somewhere between 3 to 5 years, just depending upon the type of contract it is. If it's software, it's going to look different than if it was a professional services agreement for, say, consulting services on lobbyists or something like that. Those types of things, we are trying to make sure we're incorporating a longer standing contract. Those likely will exceed this, and they'd have to come to the board anyway, because most of those contracts on an annual basis could be anywhere between 70 to 120,000. So if we want to do what we want to do, which is to get it locked in on a multi-year contract, we'd be back in front of the board presenting it the first time around anyway. These really are not intended to subvert those processes at all. I will tell you that. That's not my intent. Our intent is to allow that nimble and flexibility on the one shots that we have to get out the door without having to wait for that next regularly scheduled board meeting. I think the one that I showed the best was that Toll's Home Garden project. That was a struggle because we had to have an immediate response, and the only way to get them on board and out the door with some of their immediate needs was we had to split it. And then I said, would you please come back to the board? Makes me uncomfortable.
So then the 200,000 or 300,000 limit, if it was a 3-year contract, it would not be per year. It would be for the total 3 years would have to fall under that amount?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes more
When
sense.
I look at a contract, it's what's fully enveloped in that contract. And if they outline terms, so scope, dates, obviously the money amounts, all of that is within that base contract. I have to make sure that they follow whatever is in that resolution. So I don't split it up by, oh, well, we'll do 1 year and then we'll do another year. And whatever that base contract language is, if it has multi-years and a number lines of fiscal year, then we would have to bring that to the board if it comes over the top of these.
Is there a motion to approve the item?
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to approve as presented by staff.
Thank you. For a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Can we just have discussion? I'm actually not going to vote for this. I didn't like it the first time around. I was okay with the 250 when we went up to that amount, but I'm just not comfortable with the amounts here. I understand though why the rest of the board is doing it. I can't get there. So I just wanted to put that on the record. The amounts are too high.
I've struggled with some of them. I don't struggle with the construction ones. I really don't,
either.
because
It's the other ones.
the construction contracts are always big anyway. So you're really just eliminating the ones that are, I don't want to call them negligible because they're all important, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But on some of the other ones, like the category other and professional services, and some of those ones where the contracts are actually, the amounts are smaller, those are the ones I struggle with. And I said this at the finance committee meeting too. Those are the ones I struggle with the most. It really is not, for me, it is not about the construction ones.
But that's my same comment because I get it with.
I did feel better after you said it would include the whole 3 years though.
I did as well. So we do have a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
As well.
Let the record reflect Trustee Sfraza, Trustee Rose are no. The motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9.5.
Try not to break this today. Morning, for the record, Alyssa Butterfield, Manager of Planning and Environmental Services. Welcome, Chair Kramer, to chairing your first meeting here. Trustees, CEO Griffin, staff, I'm here today asking for board approval to transform our 40-year Airport Noise Advisory Panel Committee from a committee that focuses only on noise to a forum that transparently and publicly addresses environmental impacts of airport operations and activities. While the Airport Authority does have a long history with behind-the-scene efforts and projects to address environmental impacts, sustainability, as well as climate change, we haven't historically done a great job of communicating those efforts in a public forum or at public committees. The annual sustainability report that is created every year is only 6 years old, believe it or not. And before I go any further, I do want to stress to the board as well as to any public who are listening that while we hope this committee will be able to recognize and address additional environmental impacts like air quality, water quality, solid waste, it is not an attempt to sideline or diminish the importance of noise. Noise is one of the environmental impacts of airport operations and activities, and it is the one most noticed by the public. So just some background on the Airport Noise Advisory Panel. This is probably old information to about half of you who've all had a seat at the panel in the past. But it was originally formed with the adoption of Board Resolution number 26 in December of 1979. It was in direct response to the historical encroachment of incompatible development near and around, at that time, Cannon International Airport. There were significant and growing noise complaints in the community at that time. Purpose of the panel was to receive and assess information on off-airport noise problems and the programs that were designed to mitigate them. First meeting was in January of 1981, and bylaws weren't created and adopted until June of '84. And although there have been minor revisions and changes to membership and the purview and the meeting, the purpose and focus have essentially remained unchanged for 40 years. So last year, you may remember staff under the direction of CEO Griffin started to review all of our legacy committees with a focus on format, structure, and overall effectiveness. The goals of the review included aligning format and structure across all of our public committees, right-sizing them to make sure that the time and effort for staff, for the committee members, and the public not only made sense, but demonstrated results, and also to make a more concerted effort to conform with airport industry practice. So staff review of ANAP discovered several areas that warranted consideration and exploration. Compared to the Reno Users Group and the COC, ANAP still had a pretty formal and cumbersome requirements regarding term length for the membership admissions process, as well as leadership, and didn't seem to match any of our other committees. Staff also recognized that there was significant time and effort needed every quarter to prepare for the meetings. However, attendance by committee members, as well as the general public, had been low pre-pandemic. It was low during the pandemic, and as we're recovering, it's still low. The biggest discovery staff made was that there really wasn't a single industry standard regarding airport noise committees. We did do some more research just to find out what was going on at other airports and their noise committees. It is still generally recognized that noise is the most significant cause of a negative community reaction to an airport, and that results in many airports still maintaining noise committees. Participation in those committees usually includes community members, airport users, and local land use agencies. That does mirror what we have with ANAP. Some committees also had elected officials as part of their noise committees, and those were usually the committees that were court mandated or there was a legal requirement that they have those. The primary targets of airport noise committees is really to educate, to explain to the community what's flying, where it's flying, why it's flying, to provide transparent and public reporting of operations and the status of noise complaints, as well as to promote ongoing mitigation programs. But what we did find when we were looking into this was that there was an evolution going on. While there's commonality among airports with noise committees, and there's commonality with airports with environmental or climate change or sustainability committees, there really was a diverse experience happening. Yeah.
Could somebody in the audience turn off their phone? We're getting additional noise, or is it? Okay, that's what it was. Sorry, I thought it was like a YouTube video.
Glad I'm not echoing. So what we did discover was many airports still had noise. Many airports now had these environmental or climate change focused committees. Some airports did have both. But one of the things that we noticed was the noise-only committees, none of them were new. They were all long-standing. They'd been serving their communities for decades. As I mentioned, many of them were court mandated, and the airports have a legal responsibility to keep them going. Most of them had active sound insulation programs. All of them were still experiencing high volumes of community noise complaints. And a significant number of them had noise committees because they had brand new runways that had been built in the past 5 to 10 years, or they'd had significant runway extensions that had created a really noticeable impact in the community. Airports with environmental, sustainability, or climate change committees, on the other hand, these were newer. Most of the large airports in the nation, Seattle's, Dallas-Fort Worth, Chicago's, they've had them for a number of years. But we've also started to see them start to proliferate at the smaller and the medium hub airports. All of them still had a component related to noise. But what was really intriguing to staff is there was a lot of time and effort spent on sharing information on those environmental impacts that don't generate complaints. We typically don't get calls or inquiries related to how we're managing airport stormwater runoff, but that's very important to the sustainability of our airport and the community. And most of them were tied to the sustainability programs that airports had. And I will say what's most attractive to staff were that these committees tended to be a lot more proactive than reactive. So staff had a number of meetings. We took a long time thinking about this. Our environmental program managers got a little sweaty and nervous about this potential direction here. But what we came up with were 5 recommendations. The first was that we align the purpose and mission to match with the existing strategic priority 8, sustainability. We expand the purview of the committee to include additional environmental impacts. We adjust that composition of the committee to match the focus area. We do rename the committee from the Airport Noise Advisory Panel to the Airport Sustainability Advisory Committee. And then we match the appointment process, the terms, and the leadership to the other public committees that we have. And in your packet, you were given the existing bylaws as well as the proposed new bylaws. This is just an example of some of the many topics we could be discussing and focused on. We don't envision enrolling them out all at once and overwhelming the committee, but we do think we're going to focus on a couple new ones every quarter until we're able to establish a regular reporting process and really find out, where the community would like us to focus. But here's just an example, not just noise, but the greenhouse gas emissions that are caused by the fuel that we use, as well as the idling that happens at the airport, airport stormwater runoff, or water usage or solid waste, the electrification programs that we have brought to the board before in the past, as well as what the industry is doing in terms of things like sustainable fuels. So this was the original recommended motion in the board memo, and we've tweaked it a little. And the reason we have tweaked it is Tuesday of this week, the FAA called us and let us know that while they appreciated the ability to be voting members on the Airport Noise Advisory Panel in the past, current regulations with the FAA actually prohibits them from being voting members. We've had legacy participation from 2 FAA representatives, but they've decided since we're bringing this public, we're looking at the bylaws, they requested some tweaks. The first is that we eliminate the staff from being additional members. We add clarification that very specifically says that while they're attending, they are non-voting members. That makes them similar to staff who attend the committees. And we include language here that says they are encouraged and welcome to attend all meetings where they can provide some expertise. And if I shoot right back to here, you'll see that both of these images are actually from FAA programs. So the FAA themselves are very actively engaged in reducing not only noise, but emissions and climate change. So they're pretty excited about the expansion as well. So this is the new recommended motion. The change there is in blue. I'm going to read it to you. It's a 3-part complicated motion. I apologize for how long we had to make it. But it is hereby moved that the Board of Trustees repeals resolution number 514, a resolution amending resolution number 463 related to the Airport Noise Advisory Panel and the bylaws as authorized by the Board of Trustees at the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority. Deep breath. Second, establishes a new President CEO-led committee to be named the Airport Sustainability Advisory Committee. And third, adopts bylaws for the Airport Sustainability Advisory Committee with amended language as proposed by staff. Chair Kramer, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions from the board.
First off, I would like to say thank you for bringing this. I think sustainability is something that this airport not only can't look away from, but has been leaning into. I know, having been present in a number of conversations, as this board has, with some of the focus on electrification, as we've talked about with the Conrac looking out there with electric tugs and looking to continually reduce our environmental impact. I'm glad to see this being put front and center. I think this is something that's absolutely critical, and the airport must be a leader on going forward. So I'm very excited to have this resolution. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Trustee Cunningham and then Trustee Carey.
I think Chair Kramer said it very well, and I just want to ditto that comment. I feel the same way. Thank you.
Trustee Carey.
You know, as the trustee assigned to the Airport North Committee, it's been a great move to see that this come forward to be sustainability, but it leaves me with one level of uncomfortability, is we have not had the tools that the airport can use to help residents that could have moved into Donner Springs, could have moved in north or south of a runway, with that FAA cutoff of investing in noise abatement things. So put this before the committee. I wanted to reflect that there wasn't a lot of support from the public, and there wasn't a lot of public there, don't get me wrong. But I want to make sure that we continue efforts to find a better solution for folks who find themselves with a land use which probably their fault, as they weren't springs in the type of thing. Find solutions that can put them at ease, because we do a good job on the technical side. We're showing them where the noise is. We're showing them the patterns. Those patterns can't change because of aircraft safety at high level. It's just that missing component that kind of leads to a lot of frustration. Come to the committee. What are we saying to them on noise? And I think that particular point needs just some thought, not today, but as we go forward, as how we can make federal debt missing. I'm really in favor of this to give us a broader scope in looking at our whole sustainable package and making us a better corporate citizen to our neighborhoods. But I just wanted to have on the record that has been the problem, and my simple view of it, that you know, it's not a great response to say to our residents, well, this is what it is, and it is correct. We're showing them the tracks of the planes, and it's just what they're dealing with. You could be living in a low-income area where you don't have anything but single-pane windows. In the summer, those things are open, and you're just living with it. And it's a shame that that's your living condition, but it would be great to find some thoughtful way of not opening the whole can. I know the federal government had a date. This is it. It's over. But it is still there. And I just wanted that to be in my comments. I support this 110%. I think Darren bringing this forward is going to help us be better corporate citizens. So thank you
for those comments.
Trustee Sbraza.
Yeah, and actually, Trustee Carey, that's a very good point. And Councilman Delgado had reached out. This is his council district. And it is kind of frustrating because we can't, you know, I think use the federal funds to revamp. But I think at the same time, there's a lot of, I don't know, Trustee Carey, maybe that's an initiative to truly work on, because CDBG funds or some other potential funding, because the impacts are still real and they are still there. And I do think to get creative in looking at that, because it is hard. I think we've all had a seat at that noise table where we're saying we can't do anything, and you're outside of the area. But you're right, a lot of that area around Neal and some of those other areas, single pane windows with the airport, we're getting more flights in. I mean, I do think that, and maybe that's a coordinated effort with the municipalities and the county of looking at that, because we do want to be good neighbors, and our airport is centrally located. But there are areas that have more of an impact than others, and you know, I think that Neal Road area, some of the multifamily over there is aged and has, doesn't have the insulation, the single pane windows and all of that. And I think that's a very good suggestion to look at potentially how we can make improvements in those neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Very much for the. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve as presented. Very exciting.
Trustee Chaplin with the second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 9.6. This was heard in the Finance Committee. Would the board like to have further presentation on this item?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Trustee
Sorry.
Sfraza was the motion, and the second was Trustee Cunningham.
Thank you.
Item 9.7. This was also heard at committee planning. Is there desire from this board for further discussion on this item? Motion from Trustee Sfraza. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Gianoli. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Action item number 9.8. This was also presented at committee. Is there a desire from this board to have further discussion around this item? Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Trustee Sperber. Is there a second?
Second?
Trustee Carey with the second. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. 9.9, ticket hall update.
Thank you for getting rid of 2 of my 3 presentations. I appreciate that.
Trying to make your day a little easier.
I appreciate it. Good morning, or almost afternoon, but still morning. Chair, trustees, CEO Griffin, staff, and guests. Amanda Twitchell, Senior Project Manager for the Airport Authority. And this morning, I'm going to kick it off by introducing RS&H, Roddy with RS&H, to give you a little ticketing hall expansion project update. So I'll make it brief because there's a lot of information that we're going to go into. Roddy's going to kick it off, and then I'll come and finish the end here. So, Roddy, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Roddy Bogus with RS&H. I'm the project director and manager for your ticket hall project. So, Mr. Chairman, Madam Counselor, members of the board, guests, staff, thank you for going through this. We're going to move kind of fast. Assuming I can work the clicker. I think the last time we met with you was around 30%, so a lot has happened since then. We are now in permit, and as this is a time of change, as we've seen from a lot of conversations today, construction on this is scheduled to get started in the very near future. What's happened since the last time? We've had multiple stakeholder engagement meetings, which we said we would have, not only with staff, RTA staff, but also with outside stakeholders, many with the airlines, many with vendors that will be part of this. But I have to go back to staff for just a minute. As my lack of hair and the color of it attest, this is not my first rodeo. However, this is the first time I've seen this much involvement from staff of an airport in kind of a trimodal decision-making type of process. I've never experienced it before, and I think it led into a lot of great things that we've discovered along this process. So give you an idea of what this experience will look like when the roadway project and this project is done. This is coming around the corner on the curbside. You can see, there's a lot of glazing there. We've pushed it out to the west to create this passenger corridor out underneath the canopy, or dynamic signs now. So you see that first one where it says number 1 Southwest, where people would want to go to be first on the curve for the Southwest Airlines ticket counter. When Spirit comes in, that could just as easily, because it is dynamic signage, that could just as easily change and say Spirit. As things change, as often happens in the airline industry, and airlines move different counter positions, new entrants come out, Breeze, or there is shared use, common use, these signs can change electronically, so you're not having a sign company come out all the time and make these changes. Looking at, and the screen's a little darker than maybe what I would like, but we have 2 SkyCap or curbside check-in positions. Currently you have one, which is Southwest Airlines. In this slide, what's kind of in the shadows there is the Southwest Airlines SkyCap position, back in a niche, protecting that person and that operation from weather that comes through, giving them a way for baggage kind of unseen to take and induce the baggage into the system, immediately adjacent to the first door that you would go in for Southwest. As part of this process, American Airlines also requested a SkyCap position, which they haven't had in quite some time here. So we've included one from them. Their version of SkyCap is just a little bit different. You can see two of their portable units there. Again, they will manage their baggage to cart, take it in the door adjacent to them, and feed the bags into their system. We've also allowed for one other SkyCap position in the future should an airline want it. But this modification we're making really right now only allows for 3 SkyCap positions. How you might come in if you're a passenger coming across going to the doors, as we discussed earlier, we have pretty much an all-glass storefront. Some of the things we noticed early on when people walk across the crosswalks today and the glass that you have, many times they walk up to the glass thinking there may be a door when the door's not aligned with the crosswalks. So one of the things we tried to do was make the doors and the entries evident, hence our stainless steel entry portals, so it's easier to tell where to go in. We sign them with a number, which is also, as you see on this number 1 Frontier in JetBlue. Hopefully the passengers will put it together. 1 means that's the door for that airline. It is an airport. Jet A renders a lot of normally really intelligent people somewhat less. When you come in the door and kind of you are here at that position, looking at Southwest on the south end of the building, you'll see the SkyCap position I just talked about, one of several wheelchair storage facilities. I just wanted you to get a perspective for this next rendering. So coming in and looking towards Southwest, that's the vision you'll see. The terrazzo on the floor is really that corridor, that passenger hydrology process that we were trying to solve for and why we did this project. So there's a lot more room. You'll see what's now exposed bracing, the Y bracing that you'll see throughout here. It's kind of an art piece in itself if you can see it that way. It is exposed so we keep it open, airy, and light, which was one of the objectives. If you look straight away, you would still be, in this case, be looking at Southwest as well. And as we turn the corner looking toward JetBlue, that's what you will see. Now you'll see that Y bracing coming up, and right here, because of ADA and the fact that we may have visually impaired people, that's coming up at a place where it could be a head knocker. So some of the decorative glazing we've put up here is to limit that, so people that are using canes to get around have something to warn them that there is something there and keep them out of harm's way. As you will see also, well, as you see here, many of these places will have a kiosk as well. Going down that corridor that we've created, this is a good view of that. You may remember we had X bracing in some of the earlier schemes that would prohibit people from easily getting to the counters. We took that away and we put the Delta bracing along the new storefront, which really, really opens up the facility. And press the right button. If you were at the Southwest ticket agent, just looking back toward the storefront, you see we have a wood finish wall. It's an undulated finish. It's not just a smooth. You see our wheelchair storage. We're pulling those off the curb. You'll see that we're keeping some of the existing finishes of what at the time was timber lodge type of look. But as we move toward the new facility, we have a different column structure leading to a modern mountain going to crystal and glazing. So here's the entire floor plan. 3 nodes, north, mid, south. We just went through that. Looking towards some of the carriers, if you continue to go from south to north, like you might go to the security checkpoint, we have the new signage in there. So let's look at the center node. You remember we had a lot of conversations about restrooms, and we finally came to the solution that we would put restrooms in the middle. We have our wheelchair service people on either side of this and wheelchair storage rooms on either side of this. The nice thing about the wheelchair facilities, if we begin to not need as many wheelchairs, those can be leasable facilities. Looking back toward that, if you were looking back toward it, you can see some of the FIDs. These are existing FIDs that will be hanging in the window walls. This is the wheelchair storage. This is the vendor that pushes wheelchairs. This woodwork here and this area, the lady in red here, is going toward the restrooms. We have vending on either side. Cash to credit machines, because airlines don't take cash anymore, so people that show up have to convert it to credit. And then moving a little further to the right, we complete that node with the north side wheelchair storage and the vendor that's immediately adjacent to that. Again, you can see this Delta bracing, the chevron bracing in that picture. Looking toward the north now, we have our last wheelchair storage, some leasable space. We have a potential tenant space. We've labeled this TSA pre-check. You may also recall when we first started after the base is designed, we created this circulation path, but we had a big block here. Part of that was the elevator. And it seemed to be kind of counterintuitive to create a circulation path that stopped here and you had to run people through United. So over the course of the design, we've moved the elevator to the south. So this is a look toward that way. This is United counters. You can see the escalators from the Sky Bridge coming down. So this corridor runs from north to south unimpeded so people can turn right and then go to the security checkpoint. Looking back from United's counters toward that position, the leasable space, TSA pre-check, escalators coming down. Instead of the wood-wrapped columns, we now have painted columns. Again, you see the Y bracing. There's a lot going on here, but we also have 15-foot high ceilings, a lot better lighting than we have right now with the clouds. One of the things we also promised to you is that we would try to make this as easy to use for all technology changes in the future. Airlines use kiosks, they use iPads, they use a lot of different things. We don't know what's going to happen. Spirit comes in, they typically use a lot of kiosks as well. Not everybody does. But how do we create a facility that accommodates the changes that happen sometimes almost daily, it seems like, with some of our carriers? So we've included walker duct throughout the facility on every side of every column. What this gives us is the ability to have up to 10 kiosks in any bay from north to south. So underneath the flooring we're putting in, we basically have some raceways or conduit, if you will, that will have power and data. And every 2 foot on center is a box that they can tap into to put these. Typically, you wouldn't see kiosks 2 foot on center in this diagram. It's 4 foot on center, but they will have device boxes they can plug into. If they go away, you don't have a big monument that you have to work around that's a trip hazard. It's a flush floor mounted with finish on it. And any new carrier that comes in can access those. In this drawing, you can see on every column, every side of the column, that's walker duct. The ones that we are initially powering up are the ones in the red boxes. These are the carriers that have told us that they want to come in with kiosk right now. That can certainly change over the course of construction. So those are the ones we will be definitely putting power and data in. The others will have pull strings that can be pulled through. Looking down the corridor, mainly just to get a look of this Y bracing. This is something you don't see because right now this is behind the wall, and I just went way too fast. This is behind the current storefront, and this is boxed out, so you do not see this. This will be a major element of the ticketing wing as you move forward. Some of the finishes. Exterior finishes, we worked really hard to keep it light and bright, a lot of exterior glazing. We've added a little bit of local color stone, which is, we found out, is a lot different than Vegas colored stone. So we spent quite a bit of time on trying to find that. Some of the aluminum panels for the elevator tower, which we've turned into a light beacon. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. About the flooring. The bottom flooring plan is the base plan. And it's the base plan because of cost and phasing. We hope this is not what we wind up with, but that is what we're willing. So we have our terrazzo along the bottom that kind of comes into the river terrazzo coming from baggage claim. It all wraps in and connects to around the skier statue. So we bring a common theme in and take it through the ticketing wing. We have new floor tile in this area, but this area right here is the existing tile that we have there remaining in the airline queuing space. And that is strictly a cost and phasing effort at the moment. Now, what we'd like to get to, and this is an alternate we can talk about a little bit later.
Can I ask some there again? Yeah, and I've heard that. So that was an agreement with the airlines of not doing that work, or how did they come that we're only going to that front end of the?
Our scope of work stops at their ticket counters. They would love to see the new finishes there as well. This is strictly us trying to balance cost. This is not an airline required decision. Yes.
Oh.
I'm sorry, please.
Yeah. Can you? Yeah, I just want to get.
Just so the original planning study, that was never a part of the scope. It was always going to be existing flooring, and only the new expansion would have new flooring. But as we move through it, I think everyone agrees they would like to replace that. And so I'll speak more on alternates and what we're hoping to do in the future.
That's.
Sorry, I totally forgot about that. That was a great point. Where we'd like to be is taking that, one of the alternates is taking that tile out and taking new floor finishes all the way to the face of the counters. Here's some more of the interior finishes. Again, the terrazzo, just some of the paint colors, the glass and the wedges, some of the ceiling samples. This is our wood wall, which is not in a flat plane, not a smooth surface. It's undulating, so it gives some texture, it gives some feel. You can see some of the wood for the columns that we have, and the ceiling tile and the walk-off matting that will be at the entry doors. In the restroom, which are very nice. We have very nice. We see some of the finishes there. Some of the nicer restrooms I've been in an airport will be there. The finishes on the right are for the new elevator cab. One of the things we also looked at is how not to block out what may happen in the future here at Reno Tahoe Airport. One of the things we did, we dealt with the fire riser room. You may not know where that is, but right now that's in this area of the existing building. Pulling the wall out to the west to give everybody more space, gave everybody more space but Southwest. Southwest is the biggest carrier in serving here right now. So we took a look at, can we give them more space and give them the benefit of the project? In doing so, we moved the fire riser out underneath the existing canopy. That gave them the space they needed to take advantage of this new circulation space. But it also gave us the ability to not block out any future expansion that may happen to the south if you need it, by allowing this corridor to continue with the fire riser room in this new location. So we tried to look forward. A couple of interesting things that you may not see. In the entry portals that are stainless steel, they're both inside and outside, because right now we have a man trap that has two sets of doors, ideally to keep the inside air inside and the outside air outside, which doesn't really work since both doors are really open most of the time. We've gone to a single set of doors. In this stainless steel portal, we have draft curtains built into this, so they will be working with the doors, blowing air, keeping our conditioned air inside, we hope, and keeping our unconditioned air outside. One of the other things was life cycle of some of the existing systems. Many of the air handling units within the facility had got to or exceeded their life cycle system. We were having difficulty trying to find ways to put new units in the existing mechanical rooms. We combined two of them and made one unit on the roof and putting that in. So I think that's a major undertaking that this project took. And then finally, we added dynamic signage as this airport seems to be moving more toward common use self-service to allow these signs to be able to be in play when that really gets fully invested. This is the elevator, moving the elevator outside. We said, how do we bring the new look of the ticketing wing into the rest of the curbside of the landside portion of the terminal, rather than just having an elevator tower. So we said, where's a focal point? If you're meeting somebody at the airport, sometimes it's inside, say, hey, meet me at the tower, meet me at the lighthouse, meet me at whatever you want to call this. So we wanted to embellish this a bit and create a light tower on it to give a focal point. As you come across, it's bright enough to see as you come around the corner. It's bright enough for people to find. It's not bright enough to impede on operations. And it's flexible. It can be any color. So if it's gold day, if it's red day, whatever, if Darren's having a bad day and he wants to convey his mood, he can change that color. It's like, I'm really blue. So a little something that you can interact with the passengers and people using this airport. And then I think this is where I go to Amanda.
All right, you heard earlier from Annie and Mark regarding the art. So I just wanted to give you a little update on how the art is going to be incorporated in the ticketing hall. It may end up coming a little after the hall is actually open for my portion, but the location that's been selected is this soffit that sits directly above the ticket counters here. It's 450 feet long, so it is a large piece of art that we'll be seeing. We're anticipating it, different people can propose on it what they want to do, but possibly a mural or something like that is what we're looking to see there. So just wanted to give you an idea. The bid alternates. So this is the list of bid alternates. We actually opened bids last week, and so they're currently processing those, and we'll see the GMP for the full project in August. We'll bring that to you. But these are the list of alternates that we included in the drawings for people to bid because we're hoping to be able to select some of these. They are not in order of priority except for number one, which number one is replacing the tile in front of the ticket counters. We agree that it'll change the look a lot of that space and we want it all to be new. It's just not cheap, and it definitely, my contractor I think is secretly hoping we don't pick that one because the phasing is more impactful. But yes, so that's number one. Some of the other items are a decorative ceiling element that you've seen in some of the renderings before. It hangs in that circulation path. It's a nice alternate because it can kind of be kicked off and installed at any point. So if we find the money as we move along, we can install that, or in the future down the road, it can be installed in there. So replacing, the wood texture wall that Roddy showed you is potentially a high dollar number. So replacing that with wall covering. That number 4 is that soffit, that if we didn't end up for some reason moving forward with the art there, there's a different finish that we could apply there. Again, we love that beacon for the elevator, but if costs come in too high, it may just be a metal panel elevator. Dynamic signage. So currently there's dynamic signage at every other column line. We would really like to put it at every column line so that it's, we don't have to be alternating airlines and things like that. So that's an alternate to add those. There's a different orientation for the fire raiser room that I won't go into detail, but just again, cost impacts potentially there. And then if we do this one, number 8, we'll possibly accept if we have the money and if we accept number 1. So that would be extending that walker duct farther closer to the ticket counter. So just again, more flexibility and opportunity for that technology to be incorporated, more locations. Just a little update on the schedule here. We are completed with design. It's in the building department. We're just awaiting comments on that. So that'll kind of be the final, any kind of updates that we'll have on the design there. As I said, we opened the bids for the full project and they're just being processed now. We're hoping, so what was approved just a few minutes ago, some of the enabling projects will start mid-August. So that's just kind of getting everything ready so that in mid-September we can truly start the meat of the project. And the project will be substantially complete we're hoping, as long as we stay on schedule, at the end of December of 2023. There'll be a little bit of project closeout and different work happening at the beginning of 2024, but pretty much substantially complete at the end of 2023. So just some next steps, talked through some of these already. McCarthy, who is our construction manager at risk, since we just awarded the GMP1 to start that enabling work, we're going to sign the contract and get them going as soon as possible. We'll be receiving GMP2, which is the larger contract for the rest of the work, July 21st, and we'll be reviewing that, and then bringing it to you August 18th for approval. Hoping to get notice to proceed for the larger contract in August of 2022. And permits, just kind of run through. Then construction, just go back. Construction starting September of 2022. So that's kind of the gist of it. Any more questions?
See, Carrie.
And in the prior efforts on this project, we talked about having a strong intuitive draw for the passengers to go from the ticket counter to the TSA. And we talked about using light lines and real strong messages to get them down that corridor, around that corner where it opens up again, and to the TSA. How are you addressing that?
Let's see, what's a good image to go back? So part of it is that floor, the terrazzo. Here, we'll work with that. So part of it is that river fill in that terrazzo that we're adding in there. It's only in the circulation path, and it's really, that winding path that'll kind of intuitively have you follow that. Also, if we do that ceiling element, same thing. It'll kind of draw you in that direction. We're also doing all new signage.
What was the ceiling element? I didn't see one.
Do you have any renderings?
I don't have it in the slide.
Light lines.
They're baffles that hang at different heights, and they're again kind of curvilinear throughout that circulation path.
Can we possibly take that river flowing thing on the roof and the floor? Can we take it around the corner so that it gets them through that next hallway?
So it does. It doesn't continue all the way to security, but it does continue around here and pull you in there.
Couldn't we do that?
I don't have any more money.
I knew you'd say that.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
I think you're about to find out very soon, Trustee Carey, that money is going to be a major issue on this job. So I think what they're doing is setting the table for what we're going to want to do next, which is as part of these terminal improvements, continue that effort so that intuitive wayfinding to the checkpoint is easy. I don't expect that we'll have any ability to add scope to this. And I do have some comments once Amanda's done on where we're going next and the pressure we're all likely to feel very quickly here.
Fair enough, Mr. Griffin.
Trustees Fraza and CEO Griffin.
I'll finish it all up.
And Darren, I was gonna ask, just, can you do the picture of the ceiling? It looks, bring that back. Everything's beautiful. Just, is there a way to keep that open, or do you have to have do you have to have whatever it's called, that partition there? Can you keep it as an open ceiling?
I guess
with fire suppression, like people are getting away from the closed ceilings like this and keeping them open. So I love the design. That was just a question on that.
I mean, I guess we could have done anything, but I think that kind of where we were going, this is light and bright and open. If you kind of this will be the same ceiling height as when you turn the corner towards security, and the lightness of the tiles really brightens up the space, having a light ceiling like that. If you look up at the ceiling now, it's all painted black. It's an exposed structure, but so I guess the answer is yes, we could have, but this is the direction that we chose to go, have it be a little cleaner.
I'll have to look. And then I guess the second question, and I know prices are high right now, the inflation and all that, and I don't know, Darren, if you were going to address that, but things are starting to slow. I mean, you're seeing it with. I have a feeling, that it could start going a different way if we're looking at recession, where we're getting better price points for. Obviously, there's high demand for things right now. Have we taken that into account on the timing? And I guess, Darren, the question you're saying, we won't be able to do any add-ons because of costs, but is this designed where in the future we could add some of these things? Like that lighting thing is amazing, and I think it's a focus, would really make our airport stand out, and it's just, so are some of these things, can a board add, a future board add those elements? Are they being designed, I guess, to be able to add these things later on? We can't afford them now.
So some, yes. So I think when you're going through design, and the nice thing about having a CMAR in the process is you're kind of getting a feel for what your budget is along the way, right? And so we knew kind of at a certain phase, all right, we may have some issues with budget. So we started designing in these alternates so that at any point we could either remove or implement some of them. Some are harder to do than others. You can go to that list. And some of them, it's partly we just want to see, we just want to see, we don't know how much they're going to cost. You know what I mean? And so partly, if we do it, if we pull it out now, we have a line item that we can say, okay, we know exactly how much that is, and it's easier for us to know if we can implement it or not. Like I said, this decorative ceiling, that's an easy one that we can say at any point, let's save it, because at any point we can, even later after the project, we can install that. Some of the other things are a little bit harder, to implement later. The dynamic signage, we can implement at any time if we can't do it now. So yes, there are some aspects that at any point, if we want to, if we don't want to budget for it, or we find money, that I could go into the whole thing too. The whole process of CMAR is we will have a contingency bucket, right? And because there's things that may come up, but there's things that may not come up. And so we'll have money in that bucket to say, oh, we ended this project and we have this certain amount of money. Let's order more of those signs. So there is a way of accomplishing some of these, even if at the very beginning, we don't pull the trigger on them.
A lot of other airports you see, they have a focal point, like whether it's LA, there's like a place, we're a place, and that is one thing I think we're lacking at this airport, and so that light is just so cool. So I hope that ends up, because in
So you're saying don't accept that alternate wherever it is.
Right.
I
like
was
the
just
light.
wondering if it could come later on. I mean, it just would really make, I think, the airport pop.
Yeah, I would add, I also think it's a piece of art in and of itself, right?
maybe
Which is a
that
big
means
part of
that,
what it
right,
is. Like
the
this
art
becomes,
requirement, exactly.
I mean, that really is, well said.
Oh, for real? The same thing. I thought the same thing.
Yeah, what is it?
Percent over and over again.
5%, 1%? Yeah, disband committee.
Ben, did you have any other comments to wrap us up here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Amanda, Roddy, thank you. as you can see, there's a lot to like here, and we're at that critical point that we've been waiting on, which is looking at how McCarthy has priced everything based on the bids. So we have gone out or they have gone out and they've gotten bids on all of this. And so we are now reviewing those numbers, assessing that against the budget, which is at $27 million. Remember, this project started at 20. We did one airline additional approval already to get it north to where it's at today. If we're well north of 27 million as we go through that, that's where these difficult decisions come, where we start taking things out that we really like, or we find more money. And it's usually a combination of those two things. If we need a lot more money, it's another conversation with the airlines, and we have to stop and vote that or find a different source that does not cost them their money. So that's where the buckets of money become so important, because we'll be at that moment where we want a bunch of things. I'm with you. The light tower this is a product of design, and that's a phenomenal design. We didn't see that coming into this, that opportunity would be there. It makes the airport a destination in that regard. We're going to want that. Nobody wants that old tile. Once you get into a space, you're like, gosh, we can't leave that there. But when you're scoping out the work, you don't necessarily think that far ahead, but we see it clearly now, and we're going to want that. So we're going to work really hard to get everything that we really think we need, because it's a difficult space to work in. We don't want to keep going in there and disrupting. Well, we'll afford that in 5 years. If there's any way to afford it at all right now, we will act and do it right now, so that we get in there, we disrupt the space, we get a great product, and then we get out. And that's the thing, as I hope, Trustee Safraz, I hope you're right, and that we're just on the back end of some really high cost escalation, and maybe we'll get lucky here and get close to budget. That would be wonderful. We'll find out soon. If not, we'll make these difficult decisions, given the crazy environment that we're operating in. But we don't want to stop and wait. You never know what's going to happen with inflation and prices, and so we got to get this project moving. The airlines are anxious for it, and it sets the table for other projects that come down the road, as this board's well aware of. So this is really the beginning of the More R&O program, and basically it starts next month in terms of the high visibility projects. And honestly, for a $27 million project, we're getting a ton here. Yes. I mean, compared to what airports are spending right now, this looks amazing, and it creates more space. That's the biggest thing. It's hard to look at the slides and realize we get bigger. And that is the litmus test here, is this ticket hall has to get larger than it is to manage what we think we're going to be managing in the 30s and 40s. So that is the greatest benefit here, is the space. But of course, the fit and feel is so important. So they have asked for a special board meeting on August 18th. I don't think that's on your calendar yet. I don't see that on my calendar. I think that is what we'll likely be trying to do, unless we can find a way to get it to you on your actual board meeting. But there's a bunch of deadlines here that are being met, and we don't want to always be having special board meetings to manage construction. But in this instance, if it's necessary, we will do it. So just have that on your radar too, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Moving on to item 910.
Those are so short, we have to come down a little. Chair Kramer, Trustees, CEO Griffin, Chris Cobb, Manager of Engineering Construction. I'm here before you here today to give you a brief presentation on a recent stakeholder meeting we had as a part of our Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program that we have to have in place as part of receiving our AIP grants with the FAA. Every 3 years, we're required to have goals and methodology of overall what we intend to build, hopefully in the next 3 years if we receive that money from the FAA. And we have to do a stakeholder outreach. With that, we come and present to the board as well as part of that program. So this is part of the presentation that we provided with that group. First off, we discussed with them actually what the intent of the DBE program is. So with that, we did outreach throughout the state, actually, through the NUCP, the Nevada Unified Program that approves DBE programs. We reached out to them. We reached out to local community minorities, and we information this on RGJ and NGIM so that they would attend this meeting. And actually, the FAA, due to the pandemic, allowed us to do it via Zoom. So actually you were able to have more participation than in the past where these had to be in-person meetings. So we had a lot of interaction in this, which was very positive in my mind. With that, we discussed the DBE program, what its intent is to do through the federal government in removing those barriers, trying to create that playing field for them to participate, promote the use of them, and also assist them in growing by using that program. It is governed by federal regulations and how that program works. And here again, it is imperative with the AIP program that we have something here at the airport to receive those grants. With that, we also, the RTA has to have a program document that outlines how we're going to follow that, how we're going to follow those federal guidelines. So we do have a program and in a document that is on our website for everybody to see. We are in the process of updating that from when it was originally developed in 2019. It can apply to other federal funds that we may receive. You've heard several times we're seeking other funds coming in for hopefully our concourse and these other projects. They may have requirements that we can apply the same program to if they have a DBE requirement. With that, as I said, 3-year goals. So every 3 years, we're required to look at overall what we anticipate coming in the AIP program. From that, you have to create overall goals for both not only Reno Airport, but our Stead Airport, where we receive grants at both. That they look at the projects, we look at the potential cost of those, what they could be, and then we work with a consultant that helps us develop an overall goal, what we hope to reach using DBEs in the next 3 years. Now, when it comes to actually getting the project designed, and then when we get to the point of bidding, we work with our consultant again, and they get specific goals based on that final design work effort and what those bodies of work are going to be in it. So think about at Stead, most of our apron and work there is asphalt. That's different than here at Reno, where most of that work is concrete. So our consultant has to look at who's qualified and start diving into how many people are qualified, potentially qualified, and they come up with percentages of what we need to see and good faith efforts from whoever's bidding that of getting DBEs to participate in the program, in the bidding process. With that, the projects over the next 3 years, these are the Reno projects. This is a general list of them that was provided to our consultant and also shared with those participating. These are Reno's. We have several projects. Now, these projects are all developed not only just with our engineering staff, but our maintenance staff, as well as our operations staff, working around what we want to see in that AIP program and ensuring we're meeting the AIP program guidelines, that what's allowed to be built, and part of our pavement management program. That is something you have to follow and have in place that helps guide you with how you use those on your airfield as well. And then our Stead program, this is going to be an ongoing program for, we're hoping a shorter time frame, but it could continue for probably 7 years as that apron work, because we're getting a limited amount of money. We're working our way basically from the east to the west, getting that apron program done. You've seen that. We're on phase 3 this year that we should be starting in July, but working across that apron. So with that, working with our consultant, here's the overall goals of participation that we hope to reach through good faith efforts with our contractors over the next 3 years. Reno, we're looking for at least an 8.5% participation over those 3 years, and at Stead, we're looking to receive 12.5%. Why the different numbers? Here again, it's the types of projects and where they're at and the location and what is being built. So all that methodology goes in there to determine what those percentage of goals you're looking to reach. With that, it also gave us an opportunity, having that kind of crowd, is to really discuss how these people can participate. So providing them with information when and where our bids are posted, but also throughout the state and throughout the nation, where they can get that information, how they can become a DBE and get that certification, as well as looking at various ideas of compliance regulations and how to be more involved. So very interactive, giving them not only contact information, but website information throughout the state, how they can participate. Finalizing the draft goal reports. So with that stakeholder meeting and taking feedback, there was a great Q&A at the end of that. We did have that meeting on June 14th. It was over an hour and a half long. And participation at the end, a lot of Q&A. We take that feedback working with our consultant. So when we turn this draft goal report into the FAA by August 1st, we attach all that Q&A and anything we've received in the interim. Now, I'll tell you, a lot of the Q&A, most of what we heard, there was nothing with our program and how we operate. It was more of, is there opportunities within the federal regulations? So we had a very healthy discussion with them. Well, really, if they're seeing issues with how the regulations are used, how to work with your congressman or senator if you're seeing things that you need to see changed. That's really that effort. We can include all those comments and share that with the FAA in the hopes that they would share it up the chain. But they're, again, really pointing out to them, use your elected officials. If you're seeing issues within some of the regulations, that's how you make those changes. Once we receive comments back from the FAA, they will be posted. The final draft would go on our website along with our program document on October 1st. With that, we also shared our contact information. Here at the airport, we do have to have a liaison, and he's kind of kept at arm's length. That's Chief Provert. So as we work through, say we're on a construction project and there's an issue, we always try and work with the general contractor and us at our staff level. If it becomes a point where that can't be rectified and the DBE is not feeling they're being heard, then it can be elevated to our DBA liaison. Any process through that, we always try and keep that removed so he's an impartial person hearing that issue. And I'd be happy to report we have not had any issues. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes, ma'am.
Zeros.
Fortunately, I have a couple. So in my world, there's two different kinds of this. I'm trying to figure out which side the airport plays on. So sometimes companies that we work with have to have an overall percentage of their spend with the DBE, and then they qualify for something. And then there's other people that qualify for the grant, but they have to spend a percentage of it with a DBE. Which side are you working this on?
So
does that make sense to you? Do you know what I mean?
Not entirely, but let me maybe if I explain how it works on a project,
okay, perfect.
It may answer. So the STED project that we just you awarded in April, but we finally just got the grants from the FAA. So with that design process, we finished up and we look at what work is included in there. So much of it was asphalt, concrete, underground work. So working with our consultant, she looks at the Nevada listing of DBEs and how many are within those areas that they've been qualified. So when you get to become a DBE, you're qualified in certain types of work. So she looks at who's qualified and who is potentially qualified. From that, they create a percentage based on the value of work in that work effort to say this is what we're looking for and a goal in this area of work. So when it goes out to bid, we've identified overall on that project that we want to see a participation of the value, the total value of a certain percentage. So instead, I believe it was around 12.9% of the value of the project was intended to have DBE participation. So when a general contractor goes out to get his subcontract bids, he's looking, how can I get to that 12.9%? Now, a lot of times you'll see he's going to reach it at different levels. It may have not lined up how the consultant said, okay, well, asphalt, there should be this, we're anticipating this much percentage, or concrete here and here. It's how he gets those bids back, he or she, I'm sorry, is a contractor. So a lot of times you won't see a full participation in the asphalt, but you may see a huge participation in underground or in trucking. So ultimately his good faith, as long as he's hitting that 12.9 or higher, how he got there, it's how did they get there?
But how do you, so if you get there,
yes,
does that mean you then qualify for a grant because you hit the goal, or did you get the grant because you agreed to hit the goal? Those are the sides I'm talking about.
We get the grant because we have a program that intends to meet these goals.
Meet the goals. Okay, so you get the grant because you have a goal that you intend to hit, and so that's how you qualify for the grant.
Yes, ma'am.
Then you have to spend the money that way. Okay, that was my first question.
And with that, a lot of times there may be reasons we can't reach the goal or the contractor can't reach the goal.
I understand.
And that's the federal regulation talks about good faith efforts, how you get there.
Sure.
In our reporting back to, we have to do annual reporting back to the FAA. So they look at you, hey, how are you doing on the goal on the project, and then overall. And so we do reporting. So if we're missing that, it's what can we do better? How can we help better meet these goals? So as long as you have that program and those in place, you're meeting the intent through the FAA and receiving those grants. It's if we were just, no, we're not going to play, then say you're done with getting grants. As long as you're showing participation and how you're trying to get there and following the regulation, we're not in jeopardy of losing those grants.
So unfortunately, I could talk to you about this all day, and I know no one else wants to listen to this conversation. So I'm only going to ask one more question.
Sure.
Are you only doing this within the construction realm, or do you plan to do it on other budget spend areas?
So where we do this program here at the RTA is with those programs that receive FAA funding and our AIP, or other grants that require it.
Are they primarily construction?
Construction, and they can be in PSAs too. It depends on our consultant when they look at it. Some of these projects in our AIP are design only. So here again, when our consultant looks at that, they go, okay, does this require that type of participation?
Gotcha.
So every one of these projects that we are required to have participation, we work with that specialized consultant to tell us, do we need a goal here? And if we do, what is that?
It's great. This is exciting. I wish we had more time. Maybe someday we'll have lunch.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deez Fraza.
Yeah, and I know that it's been a long day, but I think, quite frankly, that was one of the things in Darren's interview is diversifying the workforce and going out to bids on these things, which he's done, and I think it's come a long way. I guess I have a stupid question. The DBE, how hard is it to qualify for? Because I know we've had folks come in. We just had one last meeting that didn't do the bid correctly, but we have had the DBE folks come in and apply for certain things. And
If you
not
don't know the
receive
answer
them.
to that, I can answer the question, since I am a DBE. It's quite a process. I mean, the documents are about 400 pages. You have to renew them every 3 years. It can be costly. It's not a small feat. You almost always will qualify if you're honest and your documentation is there. It's not hard to qualify. It's just quite a process of what you have to submit.
I guess what I'm asking though, who is eligible? Is it?
Oh, it depends on what kind of DBE you want to be. You can be a woman-owned business as a DBE. You can be a veteran-owned business. You can be, some people consider small business, but it depends. It can be some form of handicap. It's all kinds of things. It depends on which DBE you're applying for.
And it's called race neutral and race conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of breaks it out into what group you may qualify for. As she said, small business falls over in what's called a race neutral area. On the race conscious, it's more in the minorities, the women, minority-owned businesses. As she stated, there's veteran, they're just disabled. So it's really you, and we don't administer that program. That's actually through the state of Nevada and the DOT. They're the ones for the entire state that administer the program. We have participation as we sit on that, as they do reviews. So we have an individual there. It helps through the review process as they're reviewing applications, and we can provide comments back. But that's administered through the Nevada Department of Transportation.
Yeah, and I guess just my last question on this. Is there a list of those businesses that qualify? Because is that something we can do to try and meet our goal, is like have 1 day session to reach out, maybe do an invitation to that list saying, hey, the airport is,
And that was a part of actually how we developed our stakeholder outreach, is one, using the Nevada website and reaching out to them. And as a part of, that was part of outlining how you can also see our bids. And so that is regularly, when we do our bidding, InGym is probably one of the best tools out there on that electronic, and we really promote that and share that with everybody so that they know electronically. You're not having to depend on reading the RGJ and seeing that ad, which is a requirement NRS, but really how many people still get that? It's now it's all these different electronic means and providing that information, getting people, because you can sign up and click on the areas of interest. So when you do that, you start receiving that information, whether it's an RFQ or what type of bid it is. You know, I do mechanical and I'm qualified there. Well, you don't want to be receiving paving bids, but you start getting those updates. So we've shared all that information, and we try and do that on a regular basis, at least annually, reaching out. Hey, just a reminder, we're doing bids. We have these coming out. You know, make sure you're signing up for MGIM, or you're reaching those contacts like we shared, myself and even Holly, Luna, or Debbie in purchasing, because we're a great source of information to share with them when they have questions. You're welcome.
Very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 10, board member comments, questions, and requests for agenda items. I have a couple, if I could kick this off. First off, everyone will be receiving a list of our current committees from Lori. If you're interested in serving on a committee for the upcoming fiscal year, please send an email to me or Lori. I will make my recommendations for committee assignments to the board for approval at the August board meeting. And that would also include participate in the art committee well. Second, I did notice one other, not to burden our art council committee with more people, but I do believe Washoe County having a direct appointee is very important as well. We have one from City of Reno and City of Sparks. I'd like to make sure that Washoe County is represented.
But
It's still different, and I know that they're
replace the library. I
Replace the library just.
and I'm fine with I think
that's a
replacing the
great
library with a
idea.
direct appointment from.
The county wants to choose the library.
Yeah, exactly. We have Reno Sparks. We don't want to alienate the county. That's a good idea.
Considered done, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the final item is we start through all this construction. One thing that we had brought up at a board meeting following the untimely death of General Bob Herbert was maybe finding a naming opportunity for him, given his importance in aviation history in this state and bringing federal funds back here that have directly contributed to the Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, have contributed to the Senator Reed Airport, and really helped advance what is aviation over the last 3 decades here. I'd like to make sure that that is still top of mind for staff as we think about potential naming areas for him with all the construction going on.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee?
Just
Trustee
an
Gray.
update on the status of the air races. Not today. You could just provide.
No change.
No
But,
change.
We should probably talk about it next month. So we can plan on agendizing that just for, well, I take that back. At the August board meeting, that permit will need to come to the board for approval. So if they're not ready for that, we may have to look at timing and whatnot, Mr. Chair, but just Trustee Carey, either way, it is coming back because we have not issued that permit with your authority yet.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions? Moving on to agenda item number 11, upcoming RTA meetings. Any comments, questions? Moving on to item 12, public comment. Is there any public comment at this time?
No public comment.
Thank you. With that, we will adjourn. So I have a call at 12:15, so I'm going to take the conference room. Of course.
Recording stopped.
Brown.